Ponytails podcast. Here we go.
Hello and welcome everybody to episode 113, episode 3 of season 5 of the Ponytails podcast. We've got an awesome one right here lined up for you today with Lester Crafton, a legend in his own right with tons of stories, 20 years of experience, almost 19 of years as both a sales manager and someone picking up that green book bag. Lots of great stories from Lester coming up here. So if you're new to this podcast, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. This has been a passion project of mine and Andre's for the last year and a half, and we're really picking up steam, really bringing this whole network to life of book people who haven't really been brought together much at all. A lot of you probably just now found this podcast just to watch Lester's episode, and that speaks to his reputation. We're excited to learn about what he's got going on, but you should definitely check out all those other stories of our prior guests and the guests to come. So you can check us out on Instagram, Facebook. Please share this episode and others that you're checking out. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all the good things. So as we go live with Lester here in just a second, definitely giving you the big shout out for Seth and Zane. Seth Hood, Zane Gallagher with Elevate Wellness are one of our favorite sponsors because they're getting me shredded for BIZZLER, right? If you're coming to Mexico with us in August, that's August 15th through the 19th, we're having the first alumni getaway specifically for everybody who picked up that green book bag to just network and connect and have a ton of fun in Mexico. So Elevate Wellness, they'll help you out with getting a grocery list so that you can meet all your macros and have good nutrition, as well as getting a really well laid out fitness plan so that when you're actually in the gym, you're making progress and enjoying your gift of one body. So get your fit on, elevate your life, your mind, and your body in that opposite order. But anyway, yes, we've got next up, Cardinal Senior Benefits. We love working with Cardinal. A ton of book people work with Pedro Vega, Nick Dale, Quentin Roberts. He is really doing a lot for his agents. He was on our Derby meeting this past Friday and was able to actually talk about how he invests a ton upfront into the very start of his agent's business. So that way they can have an easy landing strip into the industry. So the industry, of course, is final expense life insurance. If you're looking to work maybe 20, 25, 30 hours a week and make a 6-figure income, they don't work cold leads, they work warm leads. So they have a very easy sales process that a lot of our friends are currently enjoying by working with Quentin. So we'll put you in touch with them. If you or someone would like to work in the industry with them, it's a $500 referral bonus. And for 5 referrals going to Cardinal Senior Benefits, one of those 5 referrals will actually get a trip to BIZZLER in August. So get excited for them. And that, of course, I'm super excited about Will Metcher. So I had my personal first coaching call with Will. He works with Southwestern Consulting, of course. He's been coaching our podcast for a while, but in my solar sales with Enlight, I actually am starting to rise up to, a higher level of management and, have, a greater need to take care of my schedule and all that stuff. So I just hired Will on for full-time work on my Enlight career and life. So if you love working with someone like Will, the biggest thing that he offers is a chance for you to make that same impact that he's making to me. So I love working with Will. I sometimes wish I could be a coach with him. The people that he hires on to work with him, like Andy Laws, Daniel Burke-Aguero, he's been working with Andy Laws and Anthony Merkel. They're all killing it in that neck of the business. And if you want to work with Will, we'll get you in touch with him. And you need to work with Will. He's really good at what he does. So right now we're going to bring on Lester just to chat about what he's been up to and everything going on with his story with Southwestern. And we're excited to have him on. So as I bring him on here, just to brag about this guy with him on the screen, Lester is, again, a living legend in his own right. He spent 19 years with Southwestern. He was a top producer of his own, but the really impressive stuff came from what he built in his organizations. So was it Gunslingers or Axis that you were in charge of? Was it both?
I wasn't in charge of any of those people. They're pretty.
Let me hear. Was it TD? I just get mixed up.
I mean, I remember naming Axis and naming TD. Like Axis was something we came up with for fun because there was that war going on in Iraq, and George Bush said something about the axis of evil. So, so Matt Ross, KJ, and I decided we would be the axis of evil at Southwestern. So we just renamed Axis, and then we got pushed back for that because it was too edgy. So we just renamed our group Total Domination.
That's right. Well, the legacy still lives to this day. We got Matt Ross, who's a close friend of yours. He's leading the charge there with some other awesome leaders, and it's been it's been really cool knowing some of the people you've worked with in your time, creating district sales managers like John Carey and Matt Ross, and all these other people. At one point, you had like a 300, 500 person organization, something crazy.
There's a lot of people. I have no idea.
Yeah, man.
Not nearly as many as people who are actually good. I spend most of my time sitting around, wishing I hadn't quit, because that 20th summer might have really made the difference in my life, So for the last 7 years, I've been sitting around thinking, God, why am I such a quitter?
What do you mean by that? Let's start there. I mean, why not? This is interesting. We can totally flip it on its head, because
I guess sarcasm is not a good way to start a conversation. Like, well, I do think that everybody that quit Southwestern, we're all quitters, right? Alumni is just a different word for quitter. A lot of people, a lot of people quit when they get that first phone call and don't show up at an info session. A lot of people quit at the first day follow up. Most people have already quit by the time they get to sales school, but a couple quit there. Then more quit the first few weeks. Then more quit before their second summer when they find out it's hard to recruit, or if they recruit, they find out it's hard to lead, and they quit after that. And a few people, they're crazy enough or depraved enough or fractured enough or whatever enough to stay at it for a long time, like I did. So, and wishing I hadn't quit because the 20th summer, just kind of like a joke, because there's always. But at the same time, for me personally, I would not be able to do what I'm doing today without all of that time. And there are lessons that come up from all that forever. So I don't know. One of the biggest things, I think sales managers just get way too much credit. Like, I didn't really do anything. Like, I think time has told that I was working with some pretty exceptional people. I mean, you look at, hell, Brandon Devlin just raised $65 million for his company to go out and, buy houses, with cash. Peter Sturdivant sold an insurance company. Brian Talby's hanging out with Richard Branson. Adam Outland's doing great with what he's doing. John works with me. So, but I just worked with, I could go on and on and on and on forever. If you ask me about a specific era, I could tell you about the people I worked with.
Let's kind of, sorry if the connection here has us speaking over a little bit. I'll be sure to let you speak a bit more when I ask you your questions. So the first question that was kind of ghost written, let's hear about some of your best Sizzler stories. I'm not sure if you have right? There's plenty of crazy things that happened on Sizzler. First of all, did you go to every single one in your time with Southwestern?
Yeah, my body was there.
Dang. So 19 Sizzlers. That's a pretty long list. Where was your favorite Sizzler at?
I don't remember. I really don't remember where we went. They all kind of seem the same to me. I remember that things I remember how hot the sand was in Costa Rica, but other than that, they're all sort of a blur in my mind. And after once you actually start having a lot of people there and you're a little bit older, then it goes to more of a work trip than a pleasure trip. You're just hoping
because you're managing kiddos.
But I'll stick to my early days. My later days, all kinds of crazy stuff happened. But in the early days, I just think a lot of people get boring, right? Like, that's a sad part. They go do well, but they're really boring. Like, I remember 50 naked people on a beach as a Sizzler tradition. I think these guys go around like Speedo Amigos is like some risque thing, back in my era, like Wednesday night scissor trip, there were however many people that were adventurous souls running around naked on the beach and then getting kicked out of the ocean, walking naked to the hotel. And those fine people have gone on to do lots of things, like being a CEO of a company that we're familiar with, or going on to be VPs of sales or starting their own businesses. Like, these are people who are doing great in the world.
Oh
But
yeah.
man, they used to be so much more interesting.
So in terms of Sizzler, were there any like trips to the hospital or stories with crazy police happenings? We've had people talk about like Jeep driving into breaking down a Jeep on a stream. Yvette was telling us about something like that. What are some of the more like memorable events from a Sizzler that you can speak to?
I remember the Great American Smokeout one year where all the weed that we had left over at the end of Sizzler, we rolled up into one gigantic joint and passed it around a room for like 25 people. That was pretty memorable. Before I was I remember you could always bribe cops in Mexico. I don't really think that's noteworthy. Where you're speeding, here's $20. Ooh, that's a big story. Like, I remember being there whenever somebody walked up and punched somebody in the face and got us all in trouble. And I was kind of responsible for that because I thought the guy had stolen $100 off of a drink. I was like having a contest with somebody about drinking. We thought this guy took it. So this dude walked up and just punched him in the face. It's kind of crazy. But stuff like that. But everybody's seen that kind of crap on Scissor, right? Just dumb, drunken behavior. I don't really have any great Scissor stories. You can let people talk about that who Scissor was a highlight of their Southwestern career.
So here's some specific stuff.
Okay.
Do you want to speak more about like how you got into Southwestern, or Matt Ross in particular wanted to hear about the summers of 1999 to 2002 on the book field?
I mean, we can talk about all of it. I got recruited by Kevin Johnson, which is like, how lucky am I, right? KJ, how could you possibly get luckier than having a sales manager like KJ? And in 99, is really like I recruited some friends, and I started in 96. So Kevin called me. I was getting ready to go out and see a movie with these two girls that lived at our dorm. And Kevin called me. He's like, "You've been recommended to me as a possible candidate for a summer internship program," which is actually true for me because I was on the back of a green sheet. And I was mad that all of my friends had been getting all these jobs that doesn't work on Ponytail. So that just broke up. I don't know where I was in the story. So anyway, Kevin called. It's like, "You've been recommended to me as a candidate for summer internship." And the first thing I ever said to my student manager was, "Well, I should have been because I'm damn good." Like, and really it sounded extraordinarily arrogant, but I was just mad that my friends were getting these cool jobs and I wasn't. So can you still hear me okay?
Yeah.
And I was like, I should have been recommended because I'm really good, Kevin. And he said, and I said, "But I'm getting ready to go out with these two girls right now, so I'm going to need to call you back." And he said, "Lester, I made 15 grand last summer. You need to listen to me." I'm like, "All right, girls, I'll catch up with you later." So I went to an info session. I tried to back out. Chris Samuels turned me around by talking to me about like what you'll someday be, you're now becoming. Like, where do you want to be when you're 30? What gives you the confidence to think that you're going to be there? So that was kind of, I got lucky twice. I got lucky once that KJ was my student manager. I got lucky to have Samuels as a sales manager because he's like Iceman. I mean, he just no mistakes, ice cold, did everything absolutely right, which would allow for enough madness like me and KJ and Matt Ross and Brandon Devlin all like working together to do, do things, being crazy. But we got this steady dude there. And he turned me around. So I thought about Southwestern from a long-term perspective from the day that I decided to do it. So whenever I decided to do it, it was never about let me go out and see if I can make some money this summer. It was about, what can I become through this process?
Yeah, man. You probably said to yourself in that moment, "I'm going to do this for 20 years.
Exactly.
And then you gave up on it. Oh, man. So, yeah, what actually led to you spending that much time there? Was it just because, working with KJ was obviously like you two were, hand in hand and building your organizations out together? There were some other people along the way. Like, what were some of the biggest reasons that kept you going?
I mean, it goes by so fast. It's just an incredibly fast thing. And it's not like I didn't have terrible summers. I had some god awful summers. 99 was good because 98 was terrible, And so I always had to have pretty big failures to learn. I haven't been very coachable going into something. So I'll go out and suck, and then I'll learn, and then I'll be really good at it. So whenever
gotta love the strong internet connection. Lester, you were talking about how you had good and great and terrible summers. Just because you
terrible.
had to fail at something along the way just to get good at it first, right?
They're just temporary. But the biggest thing is I have friends. I had really good friends. I got lucky in that the people I worked with early on were my friends. That's the way I built an organization, right? Like in 99, I recruited Chris Foster, Dave Lemon, Paul Costco, and a couple other folks. And Dave and Paul's some NFT crypto guy now, and Chris and Dave are both high-end money managers in Charlottesville and Raleigh and doing great. So again, I just got lucky to work with really talented people. And then the summer of 99 was amazing. I ran into work with Matt Ross, and that was like the Ric Flair summer. I'll have to tell you a Ric Flair story if you want to hear how it became the Ric Flair.
This is something that I've been pre-warned about. Ric Flair. Who is this person? How
really just
about like something about
Rich?
Pretending to be Ric Flair on stage?
You don't know who the Nature Boy Ric Flair is?
The Nature Boy, please indulge.
He's a 16, maybe he's an 18-time world champion professional wrestler.
Oh, wow.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, he's the greatest of all time. Anybody that's watching this who knows Ric Flair. And he's also,
oh my gosh, what am I
he's
saying?
also an absurdity of a human being. Like, he's just full of crazy one-liners and wild stuff. So remember so I'll tell you the Ric Flair story. This is the best story of my life in terms of just a progressing sequence of events that led to good stuff later on. Cool. So I'm trying to study for an operations exam, not like operating, but like the stuff that I still have trouble doing, like make sure this box get that all the stuff on it, blah, blah, blah. So I'm trying to study for an operations exam. Matt Ross calls me. I don't even know how he got my number because it's before cell phones or knew where I was in retrospect, but he called me at my friend's house where I was. He's like, hey, Ric Flair is going to make some big announcement tonight. Do you think we should go? And wrestling at the time, this was the zenith of professional wrestling where it was kind of culturally acceptable, late 90s.
WWE got your
Cold, Steve Austin, Goldberg, just all this pro wrestling stuff, right? So I've been to the Super Bowl, I've been to the Final Four, I've been to all kinds of events. I have never been to anything other than this event where there were no tickets to be had. And I know that because when Matt said, should we go? I said, of course we should go. So I stopped studying for the exam. I think I made a D on it. I went to which is why I still have trouble with operations. And we go to the Dean Dome, which is the arena where the thing is going. There are no tickets to be had. I think we stopped by a liquor store and got some airplane bottles before. So we're already feeling pretty good. We go, we try to scalp tickets. No tickets are there. So then we're like, well, how are we going to get in? And we walk. Are you ready for a long story? This is going to be a 5 to 10 minute story.
I'm ready for it. Okay. I'm in it.
So we keep walking around and we make it to the backstage entrance. And so we walk in and we're in there with all these wrestlers and all this stuff. Like we're backstage. And then somebody's like, what the hell are those guys doing here? The cops are like, get out of here. So would have been a pretty good story at that point, but we keep knocking and knocking and knocking and knock on the front door, because no means next, right, Nick?
Yeah, man.
And then you knock on, we went to the front door. I'm like, they're like, do you have tickets? I'm like, nah, we don't have any tickets. So how can we get in? He's like, if you don't have any tickets, you can't get in. And so that motivated us. Like when somebody says you can't do something, if you're a legit book person, as long as it's not rapey, you want to do it, right? Like, it's like tell me no, and then I'm going to find a way. And so we saw the bread door. We see the bread door opening. So the bread door is where the hot dog buns and the hamburger buns go in, right? For the concessions. And so we're like, there's our chance. Door opens, we fly inside, we sneak inside the event, we find some empty seats, and we're enjoying it. Ric Flair makes his big speech, and I'll tell you a little bit about that because it becomes relevant in sell school. In his speech, he's talking about, we thought he was going to retire because he's old as dirt. and that's why we decided to go. We're like, oh, we'll go see Ric Flair's retirement. But instead, he stands up and he goes, Hulk Hogan, I'm building a 15-foot high steel cage with barbed wire on top and 2 men. Man's walking in, and it's not going to be you, pal. Whoa! He's always going, woo. It's his thing. And so we're pretty fired up. Like, wow, that was a great speech. And so Matt looks over, and this is the part where I get confused. I don't remember if I asked Matt or if Matt asked me, right? But Matt, I think I asked him because he's got more courage than I do most of the time. So I was like, all right, Matt, when this is over, we can either go backstage where we were, or we can go get in the ring. What do you want to do? And he goes, the ring. And so we walk down. There's still probably 1,500 people there. A lot of people are filing down to get close to the shrine, the wrestling ring. And so we're sitting there on this fence. Everybody's thinking about doing it, which is how life usually works. There's a lot of people sitting around thinking about doing something. And so this rent-a-cop looks over at us. He goes, don't even think about it. And so I go, why? And he goes, because you'll be going to jail with those guys, and points up at the real cops. And I said, how long will we be there? And so it's a good follow-up question, right? And so he says, it depends on how much bail you can post. And so I said, Matt, I've got some money. How about you? He's like, yeah. I was like, all right, let's do it. And at that time, the fence opens up. We jump in the ring. Matt suplexes me, rips my pants. And then there's this guy climbing into the ring to take it down. He goes, get out of the ring, get out of the effing ring. But he didn't say effing, And so we jump out of the ring. We start running up the steps, get stopped by the real cops, get handcuffed. And then the rest of the crowd that's sitting there starts chanting, let them go. Let them go. And then some giant man I've never seen before. Dude had to be close to 7 feet tall, just a mountain. Made me feel like a little pollution. And he looks down and he goes, what in the hell were you thinking? And I said, I was thinking when's the next time some fat ass like me is going to have a chance to jump into a WCW Nitro ring. And if I had a chance to do it again, I'd do it again in a heartbeat. You're
crazy. That's hilarious.
So he starts laughing. We get sent backstage. So this is near the first, this is like a 3-part story.
Okay.
Sneak into Nitro. We jump in this and we get sent backstage with cops. One of the cops recognized Matt because I always get the story confused, but Matt had taken some dare with some other friends he had, drank killed a fifth of whiskey or something, got sent to student health. This is why he doesn't drink anymore for the last 15 years. He's not boring, even though he doesn't drink. Sure. Anyway, but at the time, that cop had picked him up from the parking lot or something. So he's like, oh, Mr. Ross, not surprised to see you back here. So we thought we're just screwed. But some problem. And so we decided to go up to Franklin Street to tell everybody about this. Man, we just jumped into the Nitro. This is crazy. And Franklin Street's the place in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, where all the bars are. And so we hear while we're at one bar, this is that Ric Flair was at this other bar with 2 women in the bathroom. And so we're like, this is real. And so we walked up to this bar, and sure as hell, dude walks out with 2 women from the women's bathroom right as we're walking in. And so there's this book girl who was is a friend of ours, Lori. Her name's Lori, and she's a very attractive young lady, and she's confident because she's a book girl, right? So she walks up to Ric Flair, and part of Ric Flair's persona is all the women want him, And one of his lines, he's talking about his genitalia, I suppose, but he calls it Space Mountain. And he goes, the thing about Space Mountain is it's the longest ride in the park, but it's still got the longest lines. So Matt puts Lori up to going up to talking to Ric Flair. And Lori walks up to him and says, so what's this I hear about Space Mountain? And he goes, take a number, honey. He just doesn't respond to her at all. I was like, this guy never leaves character. Buys a shot for the entire bar. And we think, that's awesome. This is great. We bet Ric Flair and bought shots, go out to other places, leave there, and then go to Timeout Chicken. And Timeout Chicken's the place where you eat at 3:00 in the morning. Every college town has that place. This is the place in Chapel Hill. And there's like a limo out front. It's been 2 or 3 hours since we left top of the hill after jumping in the ring, after getting arrested, after seeing all that stuff, And so Ric Flair is there with his women and some dude, and Matt and I are sitting there. And Ric Flair has 3 more lines you have to understand in order for this to be as funny as it could be. One is he's always saying things like, there's a lot of women in Charlotte, North Carolina tonight. None of them can be first, but woo, they can all be next. And so I had a sticker on my car now that I think about it, my 4th summer. It says you can't be first, but you can be next.
That's awesome. For selling books in particular.
For selling books, yeah, because you can't be first, but you can be next. And you can all be next. And so another line he has is to be the man, you got to beat the man. Another line that he has is, I forgot, but that's good enough. And so Matt says, all right, I'm going to start you got to do this. And however it turns out, I ended up standing up and I said, Timeout Chicken. And I'm here. Matt's here. One of our other friends is here. Ric Flair's like diagonally across from us with his people. And I said, Timeout Chicken. There's a lot of women in Chapel Hill, North Carolina tonight. None of them can be first, but whoa, they can all be next. And he stood up. He said, you better set your drunk asses down before I kick both your asses. Who's the baddest son of a bitch here, pal? It's me. Whoa. And I said, Flair, bring it on, because to be the man, the whole restaurant goes, you've got to beat the man. And he goes, awesome. I'll fuck both your girlfriends and turn their worlds upside down. Whoa. And I just started rolling on the floor, dying laughing. But it's just an absurd life experience, from going an operations exam to sneaking in to jumping in a ring to getting arrested to going up, seeing your friend get rejected by the Nature Boy, and then getting into a verbal altercation and being asked to leave. But it was a great night. And what that led to, he's got another line about whether you like us or you don't, you better learn to love us. But their President's Club, the line at Cell School used to have a lot of decorum to it. It was like, you got your suit on, you're going to President's Club dinner. It's like, I'm somebody from some school, hit President's Club so many times. Thank you. Oh, yeah. Blitz, And so we'd already prepared our organization for this. And we were like, my group was sitting in Cell School. And it was like, nobody knew what was going on, but I went up on stage and Ric Flair. And I was like, there's 22 people walking into Wisconsin this summer, and at the end of the summer, there's 22 people walking out. And whether you like us or you don't, you better learn to love us, because we're the best org going today. And the whole org stands up and goes, whoa! And we only had 21 people finish, and every student manager won growth award and all scissor trip. Like, I think everybody.
Dude, that's awesome.
It was amazing. And it started a great run, and it really was about being absurd, being way over. Like, there's not a more over the top, probably misogynistic, like toxic masculine character in existence than Ric Flair being today's thing. If you want to use the woke language, then that's Ric Flair. But he's also a highly
lots of energy.
So when you're trying to teach somebody about enthusiasm, you're trying to talk to somebody about presence, unstoppable confidence. It was just a really great interaction that led, and I started getting pulled off this. I forgot about this. That's Dave Calzer, who's a lovely guy, started trying to pull me off the stage. She's like, it's over. Because I had like my whole org. So goes, whoa. And he's like, you're destroying decorum. Like, don't do this. It's over, Lester. And Samuel's like, see all those people behind you that sold more than you? You better go sell a lot of books with all the shit you're talking. Like, this is ridiculous. And so Dave Calzer, because he pulled me off, became our arch enemy that summer. So I recorded some customers. I paid some customer's kid to record some WCW Nitro, some Ric Flair segments that summer. And we went to a Sunday meeting, and I'm like, are you guys ready for some advanced sales? And I put in Dave Calzer's advanced sales, and everybody starts booing. Like, boo! They started booing. I'm like, I don't want to watch this crap either. We took it out, VHS tape, and we all stomped on it. I'm like, you guys ready for some real advanced sales? And we put Ric Flair. Everybody went crazy. We had an amazing week, But those are just. Man. it was just fun. So you asked me, how did I stay with it for so long? It was just fun. There were a lot of things I did. I don't really have regrets, but I have like, man, God, that was kind of stupid, or that was over the top, or I really shouldn't have done that. Maybe should have said that. Anything that I've ever said or done that caused someone to believe, that I was against them, and they had that in their head. I wish I could erase all that, but I did the best I could. It's amazing it ever worked out at all. But I stayed as long as I did because I had really good friends, KJ, Matt, Brandon, and then eventually John. And before that, Alex and Chris and Paul and Dave. And, there are just a lot of people that I really, really, really enjoyed working with. And it became a passion. I'm like, how could I be really good at helping these people do really well and get another chance every year?
Yeah, man. And you kind of took a weird edge to it. The absurdity is not a very common angle for most people. So what were some of like the other things, like how you ran your business in particular, that were particularly countercultural within Southwestern, or like stirred the pot, any sort of controversies that you care to talk about?
I don't know. There were a lot of controversies, but maybe there were. I remember getting in trouble a lot of different times. Like one time, I was at a sales manager meeting, and they were asking like, well, how do you get student managers back after the summer? Like, how do you get people to come back for another summer? And so I'm like, well, one of the things that I do, and I am a big fan of using absurd, over-the-top analogies because they fit, they work, right? Like,
especially when you're doing absurd things like traveling across the country to sell kids' books door to door.
Right, like it fits. And also, you're dealing with 18 to 22-year-olds. I think people forget that there's not that much 18 to 22-year-olds are thinking about, like very deeply. They're thinking about like, I mean, you're just so raised with hormones that if you can't use like what they're thinking about to connect with them, you really lost the battle. So I remember being a sales manager meeting. I'm like, well, one of the things, and I could have picked a better analogy. Like I could have said this, not like this, but I said, well, when I'm meeting with someone and they're telling me they don't want to sell books again, I'm like, well, I hear you, Nick. So this is what I hear when you're saying that. So Nick, you're telling me you don't want to sell books again. If I looked at you and said, I don't want to have anal sex with you again, what would you say?
Lester, we've never had anal sex before.
Right. Like you're right. We've never done this. And so the problem with this statement is the again part. Like, you don't want to have anal sex with me again. I don't want you to sell books again because you haven't done what I'm talking to you about doing. Like whatever you did this summer. I'm not talking about doing that again. I'm talking about actually going out and doing well. So it was just a really off-color way of illustrating the word again and creating a pattern interrupt for like nonsense sales talk that somebody had been thinking of since week 6 of the summer when they got off schedule,
So you probably pissed off a few people from that analogy, huh?
I remember that I got in trouble with, I actually learned a lot through this because I remember Nate Vogel, who's gone on to do great things in Silicon Valley. So he understands decorum. I was very just troubled by this analogy, as any good human being would be. And Henry told me about it and said he was really upset. And I'm like, I'm really bothered by people who get bothered by such little things. And he goes, well, doesn't that? And then Henry said, well, doesn't that make you somebody who's bothered? And I'm like, fuck yeah, you're right, Henry. Good point. Like, so, it's like, oh, here I am being a super hypocrite, being bothered by Nate, being bothered by me whenever I'm trying to teach somebody how to use the word again in a way that they could obviously tone down if they wanted to, but it's just about, how to use this word. So yeah. But as far as like real trouble, I never really got into much like real trouble.
Yeah. That's, it's always interesting being in like those sales manager meetings, right? You use that like amongst other sales managers. I know that you're still close with Matt. Are there any other sales managers? And of course, John.
Of course, John. And I sometimes joke that I worked with like 1,500 people to find the one person that I could And so, but yeah, Brandon's still a friend. I spent with him last summer. I saw KJ last week and hung out with him for a day. Pedro, I end up talking to 2 or 3 times a year. He was a sales manager.
Pedro's awesome.
I listen to Samuel's podcast or Samuel's son's podcast, basketball podcast.
Oh, cool.
That's good. Aaron Shafer.
Heck yeah.
I haven't talked to in a year and a half, but he bought solar from us. And Virgie, I think, is a wonderful human soul. I don't think there's very many people in the world that are better than Virgie when it comes to just honesty and heart and goodness. She's just a good human being.
Yeah.
I don't talk to Yvette much, but if I saw Yvette, we could hang out for hours.
Yeah. The two of you have said some of the best things about each other that I've ever heard anybody say about any other person. So.
She's just amazing. We had to go to South Africa together. We were, it's what happens when you're doing well at the same time as another person. Yvette and I were both doing well at building an organization at about the same time. It also happened to be a time where there wasn't a lot of stuff going on in the organization that was super great. So it was like standing out, felt good. Yvette's amazing. Like
she is.
But she can't help it. Nebraska's amazing. So if you come from Nebraska, you don't have much of a choice but being awesome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
most of our team is on the podcast made of Nebraskans. So go Big Redder or something like that.
My summer in Grand Island. That was amazing. Go ahead.
Yeah. So that was your second or third summer, right?
Second summer. Yeah. That was after I went out. Did all right my first summer, but try to do it my own way, which is then I have to learn how to do it the right way, and then I can do it my own way again. But the second summer I decided to be on schedule. Imagine that, like actually not doing any suicide calls and using a gold card and really being on schedule and doing short demos and doing an introduction and closing and all these amazing things. So I went from like never having a 30 customer week my first summer to averaging like 50 or 60 my second summer.
Dang.
And I give all the credit to Nebraska. It had nothing to do with me. Platte Maps and Nebraskans. Good place.
Hey, I'll give Nebraska a shout out. Love my home state because they are the only state in the U.S. that is in top 10 for both K through 12 education as well as college education. So the educational system in Nebraska is aggregate like top 5, top 6 in the nation every year. So
those kids must have used those books from '96. That's
good. raising those IQ points.
Yeah. So anyway, that's Nebraska. I love Nebraska. What else you want to talk about? Those are some stories. I've already said like 5 or 6 cuss words. Sorry about that, but they're in context.
Please, by all means, we let it fly. So when I think of other people who have relationships on the sales manager side of things, I was just in Jacksonville, like 5 minutes away from Mark Rao's house. What's your relationship with Rao like?
I don't have a relationship with Rao. I don't have not a relationship with Rao. Like, I mean, there was times like if you're talking about the 1999 to 2003 era, there's like being at a President's Club dinner and like everybody from Eagle Blitz is like, I just did this for Brian Ross, who's awesome. Brian and Mark, I did this. I brought out 20 people for Brian. I like to thank Brian and Mark. And it was like a progression, like never ending. Do this for Brian and Mark. So Matt and I decided that we were going to stand up and thank Mark Rao and Brian Ross too, just because we thought it was funny. Like it was so robotic that we're like, okay, maybe we should thank Brian and Mark. And so we thought we had some kind of problem with them. But the truth is, I think that the proof is in the pudding. And I think that Mark Rao, without question, has been the best sales manager in Southwestern history. He's still there, right? Like,
yeah, he's the director of U.S. sales.
Yeah, I mean, at least in the normal era, they're like, and the one thing that I appreciate about Mark is that he never pretended. He doesn't pretend.
Yeah, that's very true.
Like he very much believes that the world is a certain way, and the way to compete and win in this world is to develop a certain set of characteristics. Part of those is being yelled at by your supervisor and dealing with it. And like doing what you say you're going to do, even no matter how hard it is. And if you don't do it exactly right, then that's your fault. And there's validity in all of that, especially if you're going to be plugged into the machine that is our current way society is structured. So as far as preparing people for corporate America, I don't think it's possible to be better than Mark. And I'm glad that he did the job that he did, because heck, I could think of Pedro and Quentin you just named, and Matt, I mean, off the top of my head, we have 3 customers from Eagle Blitz that had no problem paying for solar because they're doing really well because of the stuff that Mark Rao taught them. But maybe younger on, I know that Mark probably, like, I'm fat from COVID. Sometimes I get fat. Sometimes I'm skinny. I got to go back and forth. So I know Mark doesn't think I have much respect for myself because of the way I, spend all my time feeding my brain and don't spend a lot of time feeding my body well. So at least I've heard that. I don't know that, but I have nothing but respect for Mark, and I love the people that he worked with. And it was cool because we were different enough that it showed people that you didn't have to be exactly one way in order to have a career. I probably from the time I started being decent as a sales manager, I really started caring a lot about the stated mission, right? Which at the time was to be the best organization in the world, helping young people develop the skills and character they need to reach their goals in life. And so once the goal in life is to do really well in corporate America, I don't think anybody does that better than Mark. I don't have anything bad to say about Mark Rao. I think he's great.
Yeah, I love it. Had a specific request to ask that question. You bring up the mission statement, and I've always loved it. And what I found out from my roommate, who's a current bookman, he's been full-time recruiting this year, and when they go over that slide in the slideshow of what the mission statement is, it is to be an organization that helps young people to develop the skills and character to reach their goals in life. Or simply just to do that. And so they took out the best organization in the world. So what are your thoughts on that amendment of such a mission statement?
Well, from a high-level standpoint, I think that it points towards philosophically, probably the only path that they'll ever have to get there. Because to be the best is being comparative, and you're looking around at what all these other organizations are doing, instead of just being an organization that does that. If you're an organization who does that and does it well, imagine you're going to do pretty well, Yeah. Well, here's something I want to riff about that I've never heard an alumni talk about before. If you're down to hear about it.
Let's hear it. Freestyle.
I think that a lot of people, I've said this before at GRS many times ago, but when people talk about their Southwestern experience, you got to realize they're not really talking about Southwestern. What they're talking about is their personal experience selling books at the innermost level, and then they're talking about their relationship with their roommates, because those are the second most important. Then they're talking about their relationship with their student manager and team. Then they're talking about the relationship with their organization. Then they're talking about the relationship with their sales manager, and then they're talking about Southwestern, but they say Southwestern. And I don't think anybody that's ever met anywhere close to being the same humans, right? Like, that's just, we're wired differently. But to say Southwestern, and to me and Mark and Matt and everybody else, it's kind of like crappy. But the thing that I think is underappreciated about Southwestern is that we all know it. We all know the company started out selling Bibles, but think about what that meant in like the early 1900s, right? Like, there was no internet, there's no Christopher Hitchens, there were no atheists, there were no religions bad. If they were around, they just didn't say anything, because at the time, church was Facebook. It's where you went on going on in your community. It also was the only time, no matter what job you were doing, where you sat around for an hour and you heard people talk about how do we become better people that are better servants of humans. There's an eternal quality to that. And I say all of that to set up the societal context in which these kids were going out selling these Bibles. So you know how much guilt people have from like not being on schedule. It can be traumatizing for years. There are people that can be messed up for a long time from one summer because they felt like they weren't enough from their experience, either because of their experience or because of some leadership or Southwestern or whatever. But if you were doing something good, like you knew that what you were doing could potentially keep somebody from going to hell, right? Like, that this is the good book. Like, and if they don't use the book, that just means they're a heathen. It doesn't mean you sold them a book that wasn't useful. Wow. That you feel bad about when this family doesn't use their books, which you can actually show them how to use the books if you want to and not have to have that. But most people would rather have an excuse to not go see the next person. So nobody uses the books. But think about the Bible. The Bible's like, you're going to use it. If you don't, it's on you. It's your eternal life. But at least I put it in your hands, right? And so what does that mean about skipping a door? It means if you skip a door, you're literally having a conversation, an eternal consequence type situation. If you're not willing to go do your very best,
I have never thought about it like this.
I haven't heard anybody talk about it like that, but think about it. Like that goodness of this effort and what you're doing without the context of it being religious. Like, and you see people leave Southwestern that have some of the same hangups as people who live different religions. It's the same, you hear them say the same stuff. And it's because of that. And if you recall, Southwestern doesn't have like a training program. What we really have is that each one teach one. Your student manager teaches you. Yeah, we have sales school, but by week 7, does any organization look anything like sales school? Like what it was supposed to be? Of course not.
Right.
It's just, but that, I call it zealotry, but contextually, societally, makes perfectly good sense given the product that's being sold. It also means everybody's a prospect. It's something that's affordable for everybody. And so when you start to see people get really confused about their Southwestern experience, it basically all starts when we started selling books, educational books. And then we started, because then you had to mark people off your pre-approach map. It just doesn't feel good to mark people off a pre-approach map. One of the, even though nobody ever copied it, he sold to everybody. Dave Brown had like 10,000 customers. Like every grandma got some CDs for kids or some kids books.
Yeah.
He was doing that, that thing for a while. And it's like still record holder for a couple of minutes. Then Dustin Kaye came in, and then I guess now it's the awesome Estonian guy that sold all those.
Bulgarian.
Whoa, good for him.
Yeah. Shout out to Dave Causer from your earlier story. He was actually lucky enough to have a 30,000 unit producer, 2 20,000 unit producers, an 18,000 unit producer, and like a 16,000 unit producer. 5 of the top 6 salespeople this past summer.
I want to say something snarky and then say something really good about Dave. The snarky thing I have to say is that I wish post-dated checks accounted for units, back then, these payment year programs or something. But what I will say for Dave Causer is that I remember at President's Club dinners 20 years ago, him talking about a President's Club dinner with a big chair for the person that sold 5,000 units in a week. And so like he's manifesting his vision, it's cool to see.
Absolutely. Yeah, man. So there's a lot from this 20-year period. I don't know, like, would you say that most of your most interesting stories came from being a manager, or like what are some of the more standouts from the actual book field, from being on the field with people?
I think what you'll find is that most people who are actually working stories. I could tell you about, I'm sure that I have some very entertaining stories for normal. I was in Cancun or somewhere last year with all these save the world type people, right? Like run foundations and friends with Bill and Melinda Gates type folks, right? Like the world changing people. And what I found, the only way to possibly communicate anything at all about my Southwestern experience with people like that is just to tell them how we found places to live back in the day. Like, when I was 18, I went to some place I'd never been and knocked on doors to find a place to live so that I could start this program. So they're like, you knocked on doors to find a place to live and someplace you did. Whoa. I was like, yeah, I don't think that's a good story, but I bring that out. That's the very first thing I ever did on the book field. So I'm sure that, all that comes after that to a normal human being would be very, very, very entertaining. Like, there's stories of like, going and following people that first summer when Matt was my AOL and walking all day and just being dead, pulling over on the side of the road and falling asleep. And then Matt coming and seeing my car and like opening the door. And I was like, like scream at him, getting ready to kill him because he woke me up from a dead slumber on the side of the road because I was so tired after walking with somebody. But all of my, if you ask people what are some stories from, like, I'm more of a character in other people's stories than I am a rememberer of all of mine. Like, I just don't.
So here's one,
Give you
one pre-asked requested question. We were just at Lee McCroskey's house as a podcast a couple of days ago. So we're almost 20 years away from the famous Matt Ross incident. He says that you weren't even there.
That's a good story.
But
Yeah.
I would like to hear about such an incident because I've heard murmurs. So tell us about it.
Yeah, I'll tell you the real story in both of them because most people think they're the same thing. There's this famous Matt Ross incident where he did something and then he got fired. And that's not actually what happened. We were at Lee McCroskey's house. I was not yet a sales manager. I had just become a sales manager. I think Matt and I had just become DSM. That's what it was. Mm-hmm. And we were celebrating. We had a great fall recruiting. And we were at Lee's house. Football was on. Broncos, Ravens. I'm a Broncos fan. I remember that. And we were drinking. We had wine, and it was great. It was like all these book people. We were having a blast. So Matt decides to go outside, and this is why stories like this are why Matt no longer imbibes. But he goes out, and he gets a full bottle of wine, just takes the whole bottle to bring it inside. Well, as he's walking in, imagine I'm sitting on a couch, and Matt's walking from in, and Jerry Heffel, who, I was lucky to have as president, he's like leaned over the couch just talking to somebody, right? Well, this is the part that is maybe challenging to understand and probably homophobic and all kinds of stuff that are not cool anymore for anybody listening. I've had these realizations. But at the time, we just called it pounding, right? And so instead of shaking hands, if I saw you, I'd like turn you around and just pound you, right?
Oh my God.
It was just simulated anal sex, getting back to the topic from earlier, right?
Full circle, right?
Right, it comes full circle back. And it was just fun. It was like a way to say, you're my friend. So I'm going to jump 3 months into the story to just give a shout out to Craig Soder, who's like one of the greatest humans ever.
R.I.P.
For some reason.
R.I.P. Craig.
Yeah, so I did that to Craig. I pounded Craig. He goes, "Oh, assault with a friendly weapon." And so I think that it began, that whole weird thing, by waking first years up at sales school. It's like, or on the book field. It's like, if you won't get out of bed, I'm just going to pound you. Like, it was you can certainly motivate action because nobody wants to be pounded. Fully clothed, everything was simulated. And it was the equivalent of shaking hands in this organization at the time. It was friendly and meaningless. However, to anybody listening, you can obviously see this pushes the bounds a little bit of, what's going on. And so Matt's walking in with his bottle of wine. Jerry's leaned over the couch. And what do you think happens?
Matt gives a friendly hello, I imagine.
Looks down at me, and then he looks down at Jerry. He goes, "Should I do it?" And I'm like, so Matt would have done it if I hadn't spurred him on to it, right? So we always are doing this one up. So he pounds Jerry, and Jerry handled it so coolly. Like, I've never seen somebody's butt move so fast. He just moved it out of the way, because he's cool. Jerry's like cool as they come, always in command. And we didn't think anything of it, but everybody else did. And so the next morning, Matt gets sent home for the meeting, doesn't even get to come to the ASL, FSL meetings. We thought he was going to get fired. He just got demoted, and he would have been like sales manager of the year. He had such a massive year that year. Like, he grew like unbelievably huge year because he was like all humbled and sad or whatever. So this leads to the second part of the story about how Matt Ross actually did get fired.
Okay.
I can tell you how he came back.
Yeah, let's hear
how now we're celebrating the big year. We're having a sales manager awards banquet at Lowe's Vanderbilt Plaza. And so we're 3 sheets to the wind. We go back upstairs afterwards. We order everything on the room. I think we ordered everything. It's like, just bring us one of everything on the room service menu. We just wanted to keep going. And so it was a really unfortunate series of events. My girlfriend at the time was over. She was great too. I really screwed that up. She's gone on to do great things. I'm bad at screwing up good relationships, or I'm good at screwing up good relationships. But she was there, and then another person was there. Probably prefer not to be named, so I'll leave her name out of it. Yeah. She still has some association with things. And we were just roughhousing on the bed. We were just like playing, like just playing. Nothing bad, no orgies or anything at this point. And so, yeah. And so, or even that night. So with the bed, like it was just pounding against the wall, right? The bed was smacking against the wall.
From so much housing.
Yeah, just roughhousing, and then like on the other side of the wall is Jerry Heffel's secretary. And so she already knows Matt's got a bad reputation, from what happened before. And my girlfriend was like, stop, like, which you would say if you're just wrestling, right? Stop, don't. And so then this gets even crazier. Matt goes to the bathroom and slams his hand in the door, and it starts bleeding like all over his shirt. So he takes his pants off. He's in his boxers. He's in his shirt. He's got blood all over him. At the same time, the room service comes. And so then the room service comes in, and we think nothing of it. And then like 3 days later, I'm in Virginia, and Samuels calls me. He goes, what happened at Lowe's Vanderbilt Plaza? If you do not tell me, you will not be working with me anymore. Like, this is the end. Like, I was like,
yikes.
I was like, oh, we got drunk and ordered a bunch of room service. I don't, like, we were celebrating our great year that we just had. He's like, that's not what happened. So what happened is that Jerry's secretary believed that we had raped somebody.
Yeah, that's not good.
Front desk. So was there anything weird that happens? Like, well, actually, this guy did open the door with blood all over him, like all over his clothes. And so it was just a tragic comedy of errors. And then Matt got fired. And so then the guard changed like 2 or 3 years later. And KJ and I were over at Henry's house, and we were looking around, and we're just like, it's a shame that we're in this room with the people that we're in this room with, and Matt Ross is not here. Like, Matt's better than these guys. Sorry for anybody that was there at the time, but it's been true, right? Like, we just knew that Matt was better. And so Henry was wide open enough to not have any baggage left over, was willing to hear the story, to hear that this was crazy. And in the interim, Matt actually sued to get his job back. Matt might be the only person who's ever sued Southwestern to be able to keep selling books and keep staying at Southwestern. But then somehow he left his insurance career. He came back, and obviously he and Mark are like in Virgie. I guess there's some young guys now that do really well too. Like AJ's scout, is really good. And there's Shane Blick, and I don't really keep much track of it anymore. I think
Danny Gamboa.
Danny Gamboa. There's Ignis.
Yes, the Ignis.
Like, I don't know. But yeah, so that's what. So because we Tish and Henry bring Matt back into the fold, and obviously he's been great for Southwestern.
Yeah, so Matt's got, he's had his longstanding organization working with now Vicky Varberg and Joe are like the other TD DSMs, DSLs carrying on your legacy there. So that's really cool. What are you?
I don't have anything to do with Vicky, but Joe came from Jacob Green, who came from Zach Slayball, who came from Katie, who came from Brian, who came from me. So
that's awesome.
I can take credit. It's nice to see. I've got some descendants running around. It's probably how people lived 3,000 years ago would feel. They're like, oh, look at all my descendants. I don't really have any connection to them, but there they are. Everybody at Southwestern is a descendant of somebody. There's probably people that have giant organizations at Southwestern that have no idea it's their line that thrived.
How crazy would that be to see like a Southwestern lineage of like all the recruiting family branches, all the way down the line. It's crazy. It's because of some dude decided to pick up, a sample case and go to another house that he made another sale and stuck around. And if he didn't do that, none of us would be here, right?
Yeah.
So it's all those micro decisions. Speaking of micro decisions.
So yeah, that's you been microdosing?
Say that again?
You've been doing a lot of microdosing. It's really popular nowadays.
It is very popular, and I won't not suggest it. So
so not that kind of micro decision. So what other type of micro decision are we talking about?
Yeah, well, micro decisions, for you, like what are maybe like one of the more standout like life lessons, dude? You've got so much of an impact that you've made that is still resounding to this day. What are some of like the micro decisions that didn't turn out to be as micro over time that you'd love to encourage?
I'll give you one example of something that I did that I haven't heard of anybody else doing, but they might, and now it would be pretty easy to do. But back then it was technologically challenging. That still plays into everything that we do business-wise.
What's that?
Is my 6th summer, whenever I was looking at, do I want to do this as a career or not? I wanted to believe that the products that we were selling were actually good and useful. Like the only objection that I could come up with, I knew that I was doing well. I knew I loved my organization. I could see having a future there. I knew it would be challenging, but I wanted to know that what we were doing was actually good for people, right?
Right.
And so I told this is 2001, and I had like 600-700 customers that summer. I told every one of them, I will give you your money back at the end of the summer. I will give your money back if you don't use these. And it wasn't like a sales trick to try to push them over the line, although it was effective.
Yeah.
It was like, boy, this is a pretty hardcore commitment I'm making, but I might lose a few grand, but at least I don't lose years of my life doing something that is not beneficial to humanity, because I have skills now to go be beneficial to humanity in a million different ways that will pay more and be easier than this path. And I actually wrote them all. I got all their email addresses before there was spam. And I wrote them all a message. It's like, hey, if you're wondering about where the terrorists came from, that's on page 258.
Oh my gosh.
And it's like, I'm be recruiting this year. So if you have any stories of how you've used your books, I'd love to hear about it. So I had some really good testimonials that I showed people recruiting that year. And they got back in touch with me. One of them is one of those families that if I hadn't been giving people their money back, I would have told them not to buy. Like a kid that was just failing out of school. That was just that was not going to help them. So I gave them their money back, like no questions asked. And then the Wolf family, I remember called me, and they were thinking about getting their money back, but really they just needed another lesson on how to use their book. So I told them how to use their books. They didn't get it back. So what that has to do with what we do today is that I'm really lucky to be in a field where, and you are as well, with solar energy, people are going to use electricity. There's a 100% chance that if they could use electricity, unless they're Amish, they will use electricity. This is pre-approach. Are you going to use electricity? Does the sun shine where you live? So that in my next phase of my career, like I knew all the good that could come, all the paths that some people went on after, they had a bad experience, what got blamed for what. And so I just want to know for sure that whatever I did for this next part of my life was going to be something that was actually useful, that 100%, like no questions asked, will people benefit from this? And when you throw in on top of it, they actually save a ton of money too. It's like the hardest thing about selling solar is helping somebody believe it's not too good to be true.
Exactly.
20 years of experience doing so. Still challenging, but it's the same thing. You're talking to people about changing habits. You're asking them to trust you. You're helping them understand. It's more coaching. It's a lot of fun. But if you're asking like a life lesson learned that's applicable today in terms of how we still do business, that's something that I did because I wanted to know that people actually use the books. But you can bet your sweet ass during deliveries, I showed everybody how to use their books.
I love that.
It was all me,
Yeah, I liked how some, like Matt Atchison always talked about how he didn't want to deliver books during the summer. He would always go back at the end of the summer and show on how to use it because he was so convicted in that part of his job. Definitely agree with that. It's always funny because eventually, like in my second, third, or fourth summer, I think it was like my second in Massachusetts, I was talking to somebody. I was sitting down with them, and as I'm like showing them the products, people who had the books but didn't necessarily use them were selling them on Amazon. And it was like Southwestern Advantage books, 99 cents. product listed by Dan Moore, and they're just like showing this to me, and I'm just like, you're kidding me. You should buy it from me though. Do you think it's helpful? And they're just like, yeah, we think it's helpful, but it looks like it's only worth $1. And I'm just like, oh, great. So yeah, the secondhand
Shows you how much
Southwestern
value a book person adds to the experience, right? It's not really about the price of the book. You can tell somebody I did a lot of time where I told people, and the whole thing's just $5, and they passed just to teach a first year that it's not a money objection. Like, it's just like,
yeah, because they'll still say no to the $5 book deal because I don't want that. That's a $5 paperweight,
Yeah, like they just don't want anything. People are funny.
That is funny. What's let's get towards like how you actually exited Southwestern, because we're now both in the solar industry. You've been in the industry like right after you left Southwestern, right?
Yep.
Cool. So let's hear about that transition. That was back in 2014, right?
Yep, 2014. So the end of my Southwestern career is such a long, deep, convoluted story. It's not even worth getting into. It involves
story for another time.
Yeah, story for another time. It involves insanity, like getting put in a psych ward, like literally. It involves attempting to upheave a whole lot of tradition. It also involves communicating what I was attempting to accomplish very poorly, and I sounded like some, I don't know, some self-righteous prophet or something. It was just like, it was too much. But everybody leaves out, everybody quits eventually, right? Like, except for Mark.
We're all quitters.
Yeah, we're all quitters, except for Soder. Soder was still Southwestern when he died. But yeah, everybody quits eventually.
Yeah.
And I just got a call. Like, in my adventures seem to start with the call. I got a call from Chris Salata, and he's like, "Man, you guys should think about, Lester, you know what you should think about doing?" I'm like, "I'm kind of doing it. I don't really ever plan to do anything else."
Classic.
He's like, "But what, Chris?" And he's like, "Solar energy." He goes, "Solar can change the world." And I said, "Chris, only love can do that." But then I started thinking about it, and then we went out to California. I moved from New York City and left my stuff there. I put my now ex-wife through hell, through all the moving and disruption, all the stuff going on. But we all moved out to California. It was like 16 really good former book people, like people that were good at selling books, and started working for a company that I just did not ask enough questions about to begin with. But I learned very quickly how I did not want to be in the solar industry, which is how I've seen, unfortunately, the majority of organizations be, which is, what's the most we can get while delivering the least amount of value possible, and nothing wrong with that, right? I mean, if you can get away with it and you believe that your purpose in life is to get as much for as you can for yourself while contributing as little as possible, no problem. Then just go sell some overpriced. But John knew within 2 days. He's faster than I am. It took me by like 2 months to figure out this is not going to work. And I felt trapped. I felt like I'd led all these wonderful people into an absolute disaster. I was in tatters. I mean, if you think it's tough leaving after a summer or 2 or 3, try leaving after 19 summers whenever you believe that you're going to be doing something for the rest of your life and you have no objection to the mission, right? You're like, this is a very good thing for humans to have a chance to engage in. Like, this is like, if for no other reason, it's fucking entertaining. Like, I don't have any good stories because it's all a good story. It's like, what else can you do to go meet thousands of people into their lives and talk to them about something that matters to them, like their kids' education and their frustrations? Like, there are people that have a half conversation like that once and they remember it for the rest of their lives. Like, I made a big difference in this person's life because I get like, it's like, a brief conversation. Like selling books is the adventure of a lifetime. Take the money out of it. Take the stuff that sticks in people. Take the bad student manager experience out of it. Take all that out of it and realize that it was just you. It was just me. It was a bag full of books. It was a human being on the other side of the door that had needs and desires of their own and time constraints of their own. And it's not really about the product. It's really about can I trust you? And how do people know if they can trust you? Well, here's all my friends, that's
names.
Like it's the same everywhere. So the transition for me was very challenging. Like it was just like we were in a horrible situation. And then my marriage was falling to pieces because I was falling to pieces.
Yeah.
And so then we took so then like the guy you work with, Julio, was part of that. And Julio started his Inlight that you work with, which is a great solar company, and decided to do it this way. And we just went this radical other direction where basically I'm like, I'm not afraid of not being able to succeed in life at this point. Like, it's just like, if I want to go make money, I can go make money. But the most boring people I know seem to fixate on that. And so let me kind of give you a philosophical shift here that didn't occur till late in Southwestern, and it goes for solar and it goes for everything else. So Nick, play this game with me for a second.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Say that you believe that you operate with this philosophy that more for you is good. And simultaneously, you are blessed with a skill set that makes it impossible for someone to say no to you. And I don't just mean like the way people say that about like Kevin Johnson, which it was kind of almost true for KJ. He's the greatest. But if you like Kevin, I love KJ.
Yeah, right.
Like that about your student manager 20 years later. I don't think anybody would have a problem with Southwestern if they had a student manager like I did, right? So let me go on this philosophical journey, then we can pause for a commercial break or whatever you want to do. All right, you're blessed with a skill set. Nobody can stop you from taking from them, and they'll be happy to give it to you. It's not like you're going and whipping it out or threatening people. You're just like, hey, Lester, I need that shirt. And I'm like, no problem. Here it is. Right. Hey, Lester, I need those socks. And you're like, I need that shirt. I need a nightgown. So what would you take from me if you believe that more for you is good?
Right.
That's a question. What would you take from me?
Well, probably I'm like the type of guy who's like, I need to give before I take. So just inherently, I'm like, what more do you need? And I've learned over time that that's how I get more of good for me. But
I think any decent human person eventually figures that lesson out. I'm not talking about that. And a lot of times we figure that out because it just helps us get more for ourselves. So it's kind of like, I'll be good so I can get more for me later. But forget about it. This is a philosophical exercise. And so just go with, I know that you're not like that. You're a wonderful human being. And so, but if you did believe that more for you is good,
I'd probably take anything that you have that would make my life more comfortable, allow me to, stockpile against any aggressors, like munitions and food and land.
But they're not aggressors. Like if they came up with guns, you would just say, hey, give that to me. And they would. This is how good you are. This is why it's a philosophical exercise. So you don't need to protect yourself from those guys. You could just take their guns. But you're on the right track. You're just having trouble saying it because it sounds sociopathic. But what you would take from me is everything.
Yeah.
Because more for you is good. And who would you take everything from?
Everybody, I guess.
And so what would you be left with?
Everything,
Everything and nobody, because they would all die if you took all their stuff. So you'd have, you'd have everything, you'd have nobody. So if that's the best case, if self-development means how do I get more for myself, if that's where it leads, like the reason I like this question is because most people don't take it to its furthest conclusion, which is what would my life look like if I succeeded at this, if I could no longer be stopped, like if no matter what. So if that's the best that can happen, then I just thought, why do I want to go down that path at all? Like there's got to be another path here, and that's like, sometimes I talk to people about, there's a lot of different paths in life, but two that are easy to understand is the train, do, get path. Like I'm going to train, then I'm going to do, and then I'm going to get. I'm going to train, I'm going to be a lawyer, I'm going to train to be a lawyer, I'm going to do lawyering, I'm going to get paid like a lawyer gets paid. I'm going to train, do, get. That's how most people were set up. And there's a second path, which is create, share, receive. Is like an artist or a creator path. It's like, I want to create something, which takes courage to create. Just because you have to look around and see that there's something missing in order to want to create something to begin with. Like if everything's happy and your 401k is going up and your kids are making A's in school, you forget that there's a game going on that you're a part of because you opted into this other game. But it's just a real scary to share something that you create because people might not like it.
Right.
So what you receive, create, share, receive. What you receive is either feedback that what you created sucks, which if you're persistent will allow you to go back and recreate and then share again.
Make it better.
Make it better until finally you create something that when you share it, people are like, that's awesome. And what you receive is whatever reward the problem you solved was worth. Like what problem did you solve for humans? And that's one of the things that I'm really proud of a lot of the people I worked with is it seems like a little bit of the message gap. Or you could ask yourself, what would I love to do? How can I add as much value as possible to as many lives as possible? How can I see a need and fill a need? Like what's actually going on here? So if you're asking like my lessons at Southwestern, another thing that I learned is listening to thousands of people from NC State to Washington State to Princeton, all say the same nonsense for 15 years, like they were really saying something and realizing I'm not dealing with an objection, I'm dealing with the human condition. And so like, what are these people actually trying to tell me? Well, what they're trying to tell me is that they want to do what they want to do, when they want to do it, how they want to do it, for however long they want to do it, with the people they want to do it with. And whenever it's over, they want to be healthy, safe, seen, and loved. And the reason they want that is what we had when we were kids, right? Like if our parents, we had our energy raining down from our mom and dad, and we want to do what we wanted when we wanted. We learned these rules that we have to do to fit into society, but it's not what people really want. Like people want to be free. And so for me, this whole solar thing, the reason I could go from a lifetime of developing human potential to solar is that I just don't see how it makes sense to live in a world where we spend $3.5 billion a day in this country alone to set things on fire to make our machines move or our computers come on. Whenever the freaking sun is shining on you right now, it's out my window and it can make all that electricity, and it's something you can own. When the power goes out, if you have batteries, your power stays on. Like it's energy security. It's just, I don't know. I look at the 1800s and I listen to a lot of people talk about all kinds of issues that pop up and become politically divisive today. It seems like, whether it's race or a bunch of races, it still goes on. But compared to the 1800s, it's pretty fucking good. And what happened in the 1800s is they didn't have gas and they didn't have coal. They didn't have electricity. So somebody had to do a lot of work, and they found this bizarre way of organizing and color coding people based on who was supposed to work, and had to deal with that because it was better than the alternative of everybody working. And then, that would have been like a really hard life, but who knows what would have happened if everybody worked? We wouldn't have these problems 200 years later. So it's not to justify a system that it existed for human history. It's not like the 1800s were the only time there was slavery. It's just there was slavery until the 1800s, and all of a sudden we figured out how to have machines grow our food for us and transport our food and cool our food, and that's the last century. So we're really just coming to grips with how what we can create as humans. Not much time to do it. So I bring all that up to say that if oil and electricity could get us from slavery to just some basic systemic racism, then maybe solar could take us from a new form of energy from that crap into a world where everybody's like, yeah, I guess I was kind of freaked out at a low level of anxiety, wondering what would happen if I did quit my job and I lost everything, and how I would keep my lights on or how I would make my car move. So it's like so if you look at the connection, I just think it's really good for humans. I think there's a very strong connection between how society is organized, the way we receive our energy. I think it really matters. And so the transition period was a couple of years of hell, culminating in my wife leaving, which was the right move on her part. She's got a couple of kids now and she's doing well. But then me crying for like 6 months and wondering why I was even alive. Like, I had a career, had all this, I'm with this organization I can't trust. These other guys don't want to work with me. They think I've lost my mind. Okay, now what? So I just thought, okay, well, let's use the cycle of cells. What do we got? We got pre-approach. Well, we know everybody uses electricity in the sunshines where they live. They like to save money. So that's pretty good. All right. So then the approach part was what we spent the next 2 years on. Like, well, how are we going to reach those people? Let them know that that's true. That's where we came up with the fundraising thing that you know about, that you helped contribute to a couple of years ago.
That's exactly right.
Have organizations who are willing to send their people to learn about clean energy. So that way I don't have to go recruit 1,000 salespeople to go find people to buy things from them. So I knew that because I knew what happened then, like, I know what happens. We'll build a really big organization. That can fall apart in a heartbeat when you're working with so many people and so many systems and so many structures, which is fine if you're looking at growing a significant company. Obviously, you can last for 150 years. It's not an invalid way of going about building a business. Right. I just knew, for me personally, I wasn't interested in ever having a PC again with another human who told me that they weren't willing to go out and give their best effort to a human that they could serve. Right. I'm not interested in having this conversation anymore. So that's why we had to come up with a new approach to spread solar. And then after that, just the intro, how do you say these words in a way that makes sense? And then the demo, how do you create great value? And people close themselves. There's can you think of any reason why you wouldn't want to spend less money and actually own your energy production source as opposed to having a never-ending bill that's always going to go up? No? Okay, cool. So should I send you a contract or what?
Yeah, right.
It's just basically what I'm asking is, are you a logical human being who values freedom and security? If you're not, then we're probably not going to have much to talk about anyway. Like, you think that I'm crazy. I want to clean the rivers. I want to clean the oceans. I want to end racism. I want to do all that stuff, but it's all going to require energy. Like, all of it. Like, there is no problem that we will solve that won't require energy. And so that's all. Like, how do you tell people that without making them feel bad about what they're doing currently? I didn't know about any of this stuff 7 years ago, right? Like, how do you communicate this new concept? And luckily, I've got a lot of experience. Hey, here's this thing you've never heard of, and it can lead to a real different outcome, but it doesn't involve working 80 hours a week. You actually get to work a little bit less, And then there's the deliveries part, and there's cash collection, and there's deliveries. And the delivery part, as I'm sure you guys learned too, deliveries is challenging in solar because it requires real people doing real jobs and running real wires to real electrical components that have real consequences if it's not done correctly, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's not like, oh, you didn't do enough demos today, whatever. It's like, dude, you've got a dangling wire that can set that.
Yeah, man, I've held out those panels out in the sun and touched wire to wire, and that's not a fun shock, I tell you what.
It's a challenging thing. It's a great job. So I feel good about creating jobs for the people who didn't go to college, create a lot of jobs for people in college, but I never really did much for the people where I'm from. Where I'm from, people don't go to college. They do jobs like electrician, contractor. And so I feel good now to create those types of jobs, but I don't really care to create a lot of jobs in solar. I just want to find ways to have people be able to benefit from it. Right. And so that's my Southwestern nutshell. Like, if I were any different at all, it was never bullshit that I actually believed in people. Like, it was never bullshit that I believed that someone was capable of doing more than they were before. It was also never BS that I thought that things like resiliency, integrity, empathy, compassion, like all those things were valid. And to this day, I don't think there's a better crucible for bringing out those things than Southwestern Advantage program. Now, there's Southwestern corporate. We can criticize them all day long the same way that anybody could criticize any corporation. And one of the things I learned when I left Southwestern, despite a lot of misgivings I had when I did, was that compared to most of the companies in the world, Southwestern operates at such a high level of integrity and engineering, like finding a wayness, and like there's so many things that they do so well. Hell, I have a hard time finding somebody that can ship an equipment, like send equipment that I just paid them $50,000 for to the correct address with all the pieces in the box.
Been there before.
So 18 to 20-year-olds able to go out and do what we did. I have nothing but the high, or 18 to 25 or however old people are. Like, I just have no, it's just it's a wonderful adventure that I think everybody ought to have a chance to be a part of.
Yeah, it's almost like a party, it's of course we do the whole Sizzler thing. We actually have Martine and Lucas are one of our sponsors. They literally throw parties. They're DJ disc jockeys that just to plug them real quick, because I'm trying to sprinkle this in here. Martine and Lucas, they actually played at the Freddy's. And so like their whole thing is creating unforgettable parties, right? If you were to have, some boring party, that's kind of what living on Earth can be like sometimes when you're caught up in the oil matrix, right, Lester? You're like miserably going through your life, and sometimes you're given like all these fun times that aren't that fun, and we turn out, looking like zombies. But with Martine and Lucas on the actual music side of things, they know how to catch whatever vibe you're looking for. They have like, all sorts of music from country, EDM, rock and roll, 90s, 2000s. Man, they've even got Baroque music. That's a joke, but they have the great music IQ to make any party, a blast, and they're able to do so with integrity because they're book people at affordable prices. And they did Andres' wedding and have some great reviews for them there. But yeah, we love Martine and Lucas. Let's throw you a party with some real DJs, and we'll get you in touch with them. So next we got Pat Roach with Southwestern Real Estate. Pat, right?
Pat, reply to your email. Yeah, I know Pat. Your Facebook message. Yes.
That's hilarious. Yeah, so Pat's a really busy guy. He's got a lot of messages in his inbox because he's leading a terrific organization out there. He's, hailing from Chicago at this time, and his company works across 15 different states, including Florida. I actually used to live with Meredith Gardner, now Meredith Kelly. Do you know Meredith, Lester?
If I do, I draw a blank on the name. But.
Yeah, she's an awesome Eagle Blitz book chick out of University of Florida, and a big reason why I'm living here in Gainesville. And she's been crushing it with Southwestern Real Estate. And, their whole business model is like, even when the market's super dramatic with, houses selling at a super high cash bid, type of market like it's been this past year, there's a lot of drama involved. And so their whole thing is like be the student manager with the superpowers to make them calm and, make it 99% drama free. So Pat's looking for some new agents if you want to work with Pat. They have terrific training, onboarding. 95% of their agents stay with the company and find great success. Oh yeah. So we love working with Pat, and we'd love to get you in touch with him if you want to work with Pat too. So again, to speak about Cardinal Senior Benefits, Quentin, man, he's like doing so great building out his organization there in Texas. He's living just outside of San Antonio, but one of his best agents, Greta Huerta, she is a recent book alum. Her last summer was like in 2020. And so she joined Cardinal a little less than a year ago, and started breaking records. Greta is like the one person who said, why are we just taking only a certain amount of final expense life insurance leads and kind of capping our income because we're only willing to take so many appointments and not put as much effort into the field? And so she was like flipping the script, broke a record, 1 week sold like $28,000 in annual premium, making about that much. And then went and, made like $37,000 in a week, soon after that. So Greta is someone awesome to work with. Everyone that she's hired on as an agent has been able to find success and, transform their life situation through some oil matrix credits. I know that Lester, I'd love to talk to you about that.
After the break. Yeah.
Oh yeah, man.
I'm going to get some water while you're doing this. Cardinal's great. Quentin and Jessica just signed up for Silver last week. So we know that they're logical human beings and you can trust working with them. Pat's cool too. I'll be right back.
Yeah, please stay hydrated. So those are our awesome sponsors. Again, I'm going to take every moment I possibly can to promote BIZZLER. So BIZZLER is, signups are wrapping up here, getting into May. If you're curious about any of the details or like specifically how to afford BIZZLER, first of all, the deadline to sign up and pay your first $50 deposit to secure your spot. That's on May 1st. And if you miss that deadline, we're not going to stop you from getting a spot to stay at the same resort. However, we've got everything set up so that you can pay, $1,500, flight included. If you want us to, if you want to take care of the flight, it's like $1,100, and you can break it into a payment plan so it's more affordable. Let's go to Mexico. Let's hang out. Let's party. Lester, do you think you'll come to BIZZLER?
I don't know. Should I say yes? Only if we can all be naked on Wednesday night, like we talked about.
Oh man. Well, I won't stop you. Some legal matters might proceed from there, but
no, yeah, it'd be fun. Like, yeah, give me a names list.
Well, we've got plenty of people coming, like Meredith Gardner, Meredith Kelly, and her husband John, and people like, oh gosh, there's so many names here. Our struggle right now is like getting people to be fully booked in. We've got like 18 or 20 people fully booked in, and like 50 or 60 people more in process. So that's people like Kim Shell. Pat Roach was going to go. He's got a kid and other trips to Mexico. Gosh, I wish I had a better names list. I'm not the one handling BIZZLER. That's actually
I didn't mean now. I'm sure. Just send it to me.
You're fine.
Yeah,
but everybody else,
fun. Like most book people have families and stuff now, So
exactly.
This is BIZZLER instead of Sizzler, so you don't have this.
Oh yeah, Shane Hertig, right?
Yeah, Shane's cool.
Yeah, he'll be there. He's in solar. So it's been cool seeing everybody from not just the Southwestern world, but other industries get into solar to talk about what we're up to now. I've seen like North Star Smart Home Alarms. They just
Swinson Brothers, the real ones. Those guys,
man,
they're kicking it, brother. They're awesome.
Yeah, dude. Peter and Jake are awesome. I actually worked with them and some others from North Star some years ago. And then I was just shocked to hear that they broke away. They started their own solar company. There was like 2 other solar companies that came from North Star dissolving. And then, Julio's been in solar for a while. I don't know if you know of many other book people that are in our same industry.
Julio gave us Julio gave us a recommendation the other day for an installer in Florida. So thank you, Julio. So you're asking, do I keep in touch with old sales managers? Like, yeah, Julio.
Heck yeah.
He's solar. And let's see. Who else is in solar? I know that Brian Harbin gave me a recommendation of a friend of his that's in Orlando and has been in solar for like 14 years. I don't remember the guy's name.
Cool.
I know that some friends from our organization, like the old winning tradition, which is Total Domination now. Yeah. There's a new winning tradition, I think.
Right.
So we, Dave Bond is out in Vegas. Andy Halpert, and then Mike Duffy that come right off the head. Also with Sunrun.
You cut out there just a little bit. You're saying that some people
are all Sunrun guys right now. Yeah, they're all Sunrun guys. So those are the 3 people off the top of my head that I know working solar for Sunrun. And then there's Nelling who's been recruited, like some kid that still thinks books is about making money, that got recruited and thinks solar is about making money and has no idea what the hell's going on, selling PPAs in some organization from somebody from Utah right now. Who knows?
Yeah, man. It's there's a lot to be said about the state of our industry. My gratitude in working with you for a little bit there with Ovanova was just learning the depth at which a distinction, right, a piece of the conversation about this whole revolution of going green and owning your own source of power. I love the depth of conversation that you've been able to have. I was always frustrated, being in the industry, and like the only person I had ever met, only people I had ever met with a degree in the industry specifically like I did was the people I was getting my degree with. There were some other people who have like shorter degrees and all that kind of stuff of like install, tradesman type of certifications. But man, like everything that you've brought to the table on the totally cerebral conversation with solar, that's my wheelhouse. You're talking about like where our energy comes from kind of dictates how we live our lives. If we want to talk about this whole oil matrix concept, that
I'm for it. I haven't talked about the oil matrix in a while, just because I found that it doesn't connect with people, but for the people with whom it connects, it stays forever. So it's kind of like, an anal sex analogy, which is what this podcast is about to be. It's also called a throwback joke, which is something I learned from Rory Vaden. No laughs to no laughs. You say it enough times and it becomes absurd and it becomes funny, and there's a throwback humor and unexpected humor. It's a really good book, No Laughs, No Laughs. But yes, this oil matrix. You want to talk about the oil matrix?
Yeah.
This is really easy to see once you see it. It's just most people aren't depraved enough to believe they can do something about it, which is what 19 years of watching young people go out and do impossible things gave me. Like, if my life is a movie, I've seen a movie of heroes. I mean, and they're still doing heroic things. Think about like Tina Edmonds in her lacrosse or field hockey club. She's a national champion. Runs a field community, go to college all the time. There are folks I worked with that are right. They've built businesses and sold businesses, and they're working on Wall Street. Like, I've got nurses. Like, heck, I worked with 2 people in my organization that have 1 million and 3 million TikTok followers. So Sarah Baddock, it was a girl that came from my last summer, and then Nancy Davidson. So if you have any kids and you want to see science projects, go to Miss Nancy B TV or look up Nancy Davidson, science teacher. Like, she's one of the best hearted people I work like. So we've got these TikTok influencers that we knew, and then I spent time in New York and LA. So I met a bunch of people that do all kinds of weird stuff. But no matter where I was, like, it doesn't change one thing, that I've never been anywhere, and you won't either for the rest of your life. Well, that's not necessarily true, but so far you haven't been anywhere where what you're seeing would be there without oil having been burned. So like look around right now, like look in your room, and what is one object? Here's a shirt. This used to be cotton. I don't see a cotton field near me. I know that cotton was planted by machines, not slaves, because it's not the 1800s.
Sure.
And we found oil, thank God, and figured out how to use it. And then it went to some factory, then went on some truck, and went to some distribution center, then went to some store, then somebody bought it, then it went to Goodwill where I found it, and I had to drive there to get it. So this is just one shirt. This is one object in a room, and you can do the same thing for everything all around you. So it sounds like a trivial point. It sounds like it's just a philosophical point. Until you understand that it's nearly impossible to have any conversation about this world. And we hear people saying, well, that's good, and that's smart, or that's wise. What they're talking about is within the context where a portion of your life has to be spent maintaining an infrastructure that costs $3.5 billion a day for us to operate, to create this world, which is why it makes sense to save some for a rainy day, because what if they turn the electricity off and you couldn't buy gas anymore? The oil matrix, meaning that literally every point, every object, every item is a point within a matrix, and what connects that matrix is the energy that's made possible by oil. And so what I see a lot of times in the solar business or in any business, you have these, I just feel like the wrong people have taken over the messaging. You just are always talking about saving the planet, and that's great, but they never have the context of the planet's going to be fine without us. We just won't be fine without the planet in a form that's habitable to us and that can feed us. And even if you believe climate change is garbage, then how could you be such a wuss that you'd be willing to lie down and submit to a king? And if you don't think that oil is the king, then ask yourself, all right, so you don't stop by and you pay the king's toll called putting gas in your car. What happens to your car? It doesn't go down. Okay, so what happens if you stop by, you steal a gas, and you start going down the road? Well, then you have cops. And how is that different than the king's men saying you cannot pass on our road until you pay the toll of the king? Like, if you want to understand, yeah, there's presidents and there's politics, but then there's the king, and it's got a million different heads, so it's hard to point your finger at. And it also sounds absurd to complain about it at all, because without it, we're back in the 1800s. Without it, we're back to slavery being accepted. Without it, we're like trying to find our daughter to get married off to somebody that, could create a male son heir, or whatever crazy ass game we were playing for those millennia, where we didn't have access to this wonderful thing that can do so much work. So, without recognizing how not only valuable oil is, but without realizing that it creates this world, this matrix of this world, and that's not hyperbole. That's not, you can sell 10,000 units next summer when you've only sold 1,500. That's not any of the stuff that you might come to believe and all this BS. It's just a fact. Without oil, there's no world. But then you peel it back another layer, and then you think, well, wait a second, I thought you were talking about electricity. Well, people have to drive their cars to the power plants. And, this is, let me go on this rant for a second for all the 5 people that will end up watching this deep into the podcast that I didn't offend with my off-color stories at the beginning. Like, if you just follow it through, where our energy comes from, as you well know, is steam. Like, you've heard of nuclear power. There's no such thing. They're smashing nuclei of atoms together, and that creates heat, a lot of it. And guess what you can do with that heat? You can boil water. Guess what happens when you boil water? You make steam. And then you can concentrate it, and then you can spin this little thing called a turbine, and that thing spins a generator, which is just copper and magnets. It's like that. You ever see that middle school science experiment where you crank the thing and the light bulb comes on? We're just playing the same game at a very much larger scale. But right now, there's something spinning. There's steam being made, whether from coal or natural gas heat, chipped up tires, which is a real thing that's burned in North Carolina at one plant.
Around here too, so.
Mass, you name it, Nick. That's all it is. And it's archaic. It's from the late 1800s. But it works great. But why did I say oil matrix instead of oil and electricity matrix? Because how do you get coal to a power plant? How do you get workers to the power plant if they don't drive? Without the machines digging up the mountain, you don't get the coal. You don't transport it on a train. So it's all oil matrix for now. But what it really is an energy matrix. And when you peel it back and you realize, okay, what kind of problems does oil cause? Maybe climate change. Maybe you think climate change is BS. So throw that one away if you have to. What other problems does it cause? Well, have you not watched the last 2 months when this whole Russia-Ukraine thing is going down? Do you like having swings in the prices? Like, do you not see why every item would become more expensive? And if it has to be shipped, because every item incurs shipping, which is fuel cost, there's a connection that people aren't usually aware of outside of filling their own car up when it comes to their dependence on energy. When people talk about, we need to be independent of energy, I'm like, it's a world market. There's no such thing as energy unless, there actually is a way to be energy independent, but it's going to involve a lot of work for a couple of decades. It's going to involve new choices. But it turns out that since 1954, we have had a new way of creating energy. So when I say oil matrix, referring to when they say you're not in touch with reality, like you're flawed because you don't believe what I believe to be good and right and true about how one should behave within this construct. And all I'm saying is, well, the construct is useful. I like the comfort of being in a world that's powered by oil. I prefer it immensely to the early 1800s in either the work that I would have been doing as a slave or the cognitive dissonance with which I would have had to live as a slave master or a procurer of goods that was created by slavery, right? So I'm really grateful that oil exists, but it doesn't always have to be that way. And it's up to us to decide when it doesn't have to be that way anymore.
Lester, have you ever thought about giving your own talk, like a TEDx talk, to convey this important distinction to the masses?
Why would I do that when I've got ponytails?
Oh, that's true.
Like, are you kidding me? Like four book people hearing something is like 4 million other people hearing something, right?
You get it.
Yeah, it's like give me 4 book people. Like nobody else is going to watch this. Unless they're depraved. Maybe someday they'll be like, "Oh, that was Nick Taverdi. This is his early shows." You're like,
right.
a Joe Rogan fanatic, that goes back and watches early shows.
Yeah, man.
So I'm not saying that there's anything bad with what we're doing. That's up to you. That people have to spend a few years of their life doing something they may or may not love doing for dollars to pay the king's toll to use the king's road. I personally don't really give 2 shits for a king, and I prefer to live in a world that makes sense where my friends don't think that they can't do something because they can't afford it or they don't have time or they have to do this or they can't say what they really believe because then they're going to be outcast and like that. I just don't have. That's just not. It's not a. It doesn't seem like a fun way to spend the next 40 years of my life trying to get as much for myself as I can so I can pretend that I don't have a low-grade anxiety, that the whole matrix will shut down, which if you don't have that low-grade anxiety, that you haven't paid attention during a Texas ice storm. You haven't paid attention after a hurricane. You haven't, and I don't blame you. I wouldn't pay attention either. Most people don't pay a lot of attention to cancer until they get it. Like things that are uncomfortable. But there's two studies I've read, both from one from the Department of Defense, the other one, I forget, some other government agency, but not like a political organization, like a department. And it said that if the electricity grid failed in America tomorrow, within 1 year, 2/3 to 90% of Americans would be dead. And that's pretty dark. Like to even have that in your head and then say, oh, well, somebody will take care of it. Somebody will figure it out.
Real quick, you said in 1 year of the grid going out, 90% of all people would be dead?
2/3 in America, 2/3 to 90% of Americans would be dead. Now, there are billions of people living, or last time I checked, it was 1.1 billion people who still don't have electricity at all, right?
Yeah,
So they'd be fine, and the Amish get along fine. But our society, as it's constructed, we have lost all of the skills. So imagine what happens. The grid I read a book about this called 1 Minute After. Really good. It might be 1 day after. I think it's 1 minute or 1 second after.
1 minute, 1 second, 1 day after.
1 minute or 1 second after. And it's about this event. It's about EMP blast, which is a high altitude nuke, just melts all the electronic circuitry, basically. So any car after 1950 doesn't work. Like there's all the electricity is gone. Like you can't even pump gas, like how the hell do you get your gas if you don't have electricity? Right. So maybe it is an electricity matrix because there's no gas without electricity pump, but you can still pump gas if you had to. Anyway, but the point is that what happens? Well, lots of things happen. The first thing that happens is, people are like, oh, well, whatever, lights will come back on in a second. Then people realize the lights aren't going to come back on. And then all of a sudden, it's like, well, who's got the guns? Who has the food? How are we going to ration the food? What do we do whenever a big city of basically zombie type people who are hungry come marching through the country looking for food? There are no insane asylums anymore. There's just drugs. The people who were insane asylums 50 years ago, now they're medicated. There is no more medicine. What happens when all of the crazy people get off all of their crazy pills? What kind of cults emerge?
Wow, this is
what happens like rabbit hole. Yeah, you have even something as simple as diabetes. You have no insulin. People start dying of diabetes. All the old people die who are on the drugs and die fast. Every young person dies who has any type of small medical calamity that's easily managed with a small prescription. And then but you see the community get through it. There could be life on the other side, but the people that survive an event like that are not going to be the people who can rebuild the internet. They're going to be the people that, showed up with a gun in their hand when you knocked on their door. Or didn't show up at all, but they had a bead pointed at you and you didn't even know it until you left, like it's not going to be a very super awesome world for people. But I don't like fear-based selling. It's like telling a college kid, if you don't go sell books, you're going to be miserable at life and have a very mediocre career. Talking to people about the grid falling down is so far beyond the realm of most people's possibility that it's, it's not even worth considering. Then if you did consider it, you'd be like, that's dark and twisted and you're weird and I don't want to think about it. And then you might be left with something like, well, what can I do about it?
Yeah.
Well, you and I know there is actually something that can be done about it, because if you had 100 million homes producing and storing their own electricity, then it really doesn't make that much of a difference anymore.
Got a bunch of microgrids.
Yeah, like all over the place. I want to live in a world that works because the sun comes up and nobody has to go to work in order to make that electricity keep going. So we have more time to do what we love doing, which is all I was going for when I didn't understand that I was caught in an oil matrix. And I was trying to teach people to be successful so they could go out and, with a little bit of heart, without selling their soul entirely, go into the world, earn a really high amount of income for providing some sort of service. So at least they could feel comfortable. At least they could feel safe. And then they could just demean the people who hadn't done well and live with philosophies like 1800s people rationalize slavery. We rationalize those are just off-schedule people, or those are bad people, or those are lazy people, and we'd rather blame each other than look around at the system and say, what's the entire thing that's going on here? Like, we live in a world where it's possible to run out. We live in a world that without dollars going to exchange for those people's time, then it's just it's a mad world. And I read a quote one time that says, to be incredibly well adjusted to a profoundly sick society is not a measure of mental health. Like,
dang, repeat that for a second. Okay. You cut out
Google
for a
it,
second.
get the real quote, but it says to be exceptionally well adjusted to a profoundly sick society is no measure of mental health. Like, just because somebody looks like they're doing really well when they haven't really considered what they're doing makes about as much sense as somebody that looks like they're doing a great job walking towards a cliff. Man, they've really got good form, but out of context. It's like, look at that stride that dude's got. It's like, yeah, but 20 feet from now, there's a cliff, and he's got blinders on, so he can't see it, because he's got to just keep walking and trusting that, it's going to get better.
I mean, that's society for you.
Yeah.
You should definitely talk with Dylan Barr. You remember Dylan, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So I just to sneak him in here again. He's one of our newest sponsors with Thought Leader. He's actually, his job is to get people to do a TEDx talk. And so like they love
what a great segue.
Dude, your passion is my passion. I've like talked so much about some of the things that you've already shared on this podcast and then some, because it really left the mark on me. Like I have morphed into part of your thought process and seeing where everything comes from. And so, I love Dylan, right? He's the type of guy who's like, don't tell me what to do. I want to be independent and free and also genuine. So what he does is, when they hire people to work with them at Thought Leader, if you're looking for, a good career, what they do is they just take people like Lester, or otherwise someone who's, passionate, on fire, and, has a mission in life that they want to share. They help you land, rehearse, and deliver a TEDx talk. So that way you can actually, Lester, land one of those and get your
oil matrix.
Yeah, buddy. Yeah, I would love it if there was a oil matrix TEDx talk from you, Lester. That would make my more than just my day.
This guy's new house. I need to get in touch with him anyway. We were supposed to talk 2 months ago. So if you see me on TEDx talk, you can know that it's Dylan that did it. And
heck yeah.
He tells that they have people together.
Love it. Yeah. So we can get you in touch with Dylan for a new career in a very passion-filled career field. That's public speaking, So shout out Dylan for what he's got going on. Do you, you didn't work directly with Dylan? He was in Aaron Shafer's group, but
same family, same winning tradition.
Same family. Yeah, absolutely.
Gorgeous winhead man.
Oh yeah, dude. Miles was asking in the comments if there's any secrets from Southwestern that you'd be willing to spill the beans on, and maybe we can kind of make this as our towards the end of the episode here for the next 20-30 minutes.
What kind of secrets does he want to know?
Well, I heard urban legend was that you may have snuck into some key files back in the day But is it true that you had like a
Oh,
master key
like,
to the
that was
Southwestern
just like
company?
the key files thing. You're talking about when I had the master key to the company that I made a copy of. I used to be in the company all the time, right? Like all night.
Yeah.
And it started with just needing to get in my door. And so there was a key at that little desk when you walk into the right. So I could get in and I go put it back. But then I
Right.
realized I had to get into Kevin's room one night. And I'm like, oh, it opens this door too. And it opens all the doors. And I was also just really angry because Matt had gotten fired, so I wanted to see what they'd really said about him. So I was just digging through files to find out what was said about Matt. I don't have any. I think probably the biggest secret about Southwestern is there's really not any secrets. The people that you look up to went through the same crap that you did and either got lucky to have a wonderful student manager and sales manager to put them back together, or were at a point in their life, like where I've come to sit with the entire Southwestern experience and in general, I can't view the ineptitude of humanity and not want to kill myself without this little morsel that I remind myself of, which is if I had your genes and your experiences, meaning your influences, the things you've seen, then I'd be making your choices. Like, I'm just an interpretive bot, basically, that based on what I was set up with, my internal code, and then all the experiences that morph that, like my software, then I'd be doing the same thing. And so that, allowed me to gain some compassion towards the end. Another way of phrasing that is to say that, not confusing who someone is with where someone is. Like where we are in our journey is just where we are. There's, and my programming leads me to live life in ways that scare people and that scare people for me. Like most people aren't willing to go, 7, 8 years looking like an idiot to, basically, hey, I was a super successful dude, but not anymore. I don't have anything to show for this. In order to create something that makes sense, and finally, we had our first $1 million quarter last quarter, which is not much, but it's the beginning of like this. We set something up that was beautiful. So as far as Southwestern goes, it might sound like I'm playing like Southwestern Patsy or whatever, but they're even at a director meeting. It's all about how can we help these people succeed more? Like we're all just like, what can we do that would allow these people that we work with to have a better experience so that maybe they could have a good enough experience to want to be like us someday, which is so vain.
Maybe, right?
But yeah, maybe possibly 2% chance, perhaps it could occur. But I mean, big secrets. There's probably been just to bring it back. There's probably been a gay subculture at Southwestern for a lot longer than anybody's known about. I've always kind of suspected that, but that's just to bring it up in context because of the 4 or 5 times. I really don't mean that. I was just trying to figure out how to work this back in.
That's so funny.
It's like the worst thing. I mean, sometimes people don't pay their accounts, and even though they get letter, like somebody owes money at the end of the summer, and they'll send letters, but at the end of the day, they're not really going to put anything on your credit report, or at least, that's just crazy. I'd say the one thing that, without mentioning any direct prices, that would be surprising to anyone who doesn't understand how business works, is and it shouldn't be surprising given how many people publish of a book is very inexpensive. It's all the stuff that goes on around it, like having access to a Harvard grad as the president of the company who can run stuff and allow you to learn about Mr. M. Like Dan should be paid well. He's been a warrior for a long, long time. And obviously, I don't think any of the book people are book people without, Dan's influence. And Dan's not paid so extraordinarily well that he eats at the margins. But I would say the thing that surprised me when I found it out that would be a Southwestern secret is how little the books cost. But that's not Southwestern's evil. That's just like, guess what? Wholesale goods are less expensive than retail goods.
Oh, yeah.
And so, yeah, in order to stay in business for 150 years, there has to be a difference between what's printed and, what they sell them to an independent dealer for.
I guess that's why Dan Dan Moore must have listed that $5 set because that's all it actually cost them, huh?
It's a little bit more than that, but yeah. So that's the closest I'll give you to a secret. I don't have anything. One of the things that's always bothers me about alumni too, talking about Southwestern, they don't understand how much it can change from one year. It sounds the same, it looks the same, but at the end of the day, the adventure is kind of the same. The people are still people, but there's a lot that can change just with a few leaders, like JT or like Matt or like AJ or like Vicky or, like Virgie. It doesn't take, or Shane Blick or all these guys, it doesn't take a lot of people to really shift things an entire way. And again, they're not even talking about Southwestern, they're talking about their context. So like, I remember their summers, I remember their student managers. I don't know about their HQ. I remember their student managers, and I remember their relationship with me. And I had hoped to leave as many people as I left on a bad note. Wish I hadn't. I'd apologize to them face to face if anything I said or did was, which obviously, if you've listened to me today, it wouldn't be that hard to imagine a scenario where I might have said something a little bit off track that would have really pissed somebody off. Doesn't mean I don't have a deep degree of thought or empathy put behind things. It was an attempt to help them do better, but the way I defined better might not have been completely aligned with what they thought was better, and so it created conflict and stuff at the end. What kind of things? Sorry, I wish I could give you something more juicy. It's got to be really. How does something last for 150 years without being simple and boring? All the way up and all the way down. I think
I've heard of legal battles. I don't know any details, but I hear that they have quite the lawyers. People.
Matt Ross couldn't get his job back, and he sued to get it back. So I'd say that their lawyers are pretty good. Like where they can keep somebody away. I don't know of any legal battles. The only ones that ever came to my attention were the Southwestern Truth thing from a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I believe that was a lot of libel and stuff. I think it was a tragic experience combined with possibly some stuff that you can't say because it's not true. You can't just go around slandering or libeling something because you don't like it. Really what it comes down to is like, did Southwestern refuse to sell you books at the price that you agreed to sell them at? Well, then nothing else was owed to you. It was all
because that's what's written into the dealer agreement, right?
Right. Like that's the dealer agreement. Did you get your books? Did you pay them for the books like you said that you would? Okay. Well, then everything else is about you and your experience and your organization. Like
there it is. Yeah.
Wholesale publisher of books. The rest is for your benefit, although you might have come to believe that it was to your detriment because somebody didn't care about you or whatever. Like I know that the thing that hurt me the most at Southwestern was that I love these kids, and then I'd see them grow up and they do great. Like they were right when they were starting to be useful. Like, okay, now you can actually go out and positively influence a lot of people. And I've put the effort into you that will allow that to occur. You've put the effort into doing it to allow it to occur. But then you leave, and then it seems like I never cared about you at all. Like it never mattered one bit. Like it was all just a joke. I just care about you if you sell books because I don't call you for 2 years, or for 10 years or 15 years. Like I didn't stop caring. I just got busy. And then, but whenever I did have time, you'd gotten so busy. I was trying to recreate that experience for all the people who were still there that caused you to want to have a continued relationship after. But I'm text in book 1999 to 2002 and 3, to this day. And like I probably got 8 texts. We've been saying.
Oh man,
I had a lot of friends that I met what's that?
The internet is strong with you, bro. You're coming in crystal clear. Now repeat a little bit. You were just saying that a lot of the people that you spent those 99 through 2003 summers.
Yeah, I'm on a text thread with them right now. If I hit send, I probably have today's Wordles. On there, yep. Yeah. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, loves back for another, talking about Tar Heel basketball. I've got 3 texts from 3 guys that sold books with me from that 1999 organization, the Ric Flair stomping Dave Calzer event sales tape. That what are we, like 23 years later?
Yeah.
And we're all still friends. So it was something real. Like, and I just like things that are real. I get myself in trouble a lot because I get bored with small talk. Like I feel like a bad person. I don't know most of my friends' kids' names. Like, and I don't think that they expect you to if you don't talk all the time, but it's not that I don't care. Like if they lost a kid or something, I would hurt for them because of that basic human experience. And it would mean more to me because it's somebody that I know. The only kids I lost were before they were born. So I don't know what it would be like to lose children who
you invested in
are already real little people. And that's really dark to even talk about. But the point is, I think a lot of times we end up not connecting with each other because we think, oh, I don't know enough about them. I haven't kept up with them. Or we're doing something where there's really no reason to reach out to somebody. Or they think that if you're reaching out to them, you must be trying to get something from them, or else why would you be calling,
Join my pyramid scheme today, Lester. We've got health food, we've got watches, we've got timeshares, we've got whatever you want. Let's
there's a lot of people, but people do great in timeshares. I don't know any watch people, but we've got it's just I don't have much to add to that. I most of the people who I would count as very good friends that I could count on no matter what are people I met selling books. Maybe if I hadn't been there for 19 years, I would have met other friends in different ways, and those relationships would have even been healthier and more bountiful and more abundant. I don't know. But I didn't live that life. I lived the extreme, crazy, why don't I go see how many of the, why don't I go run this movie over and over again and see if it has a different ending? Right. I want to see how this plays out this time. I think we've got a good cast here. Like we got a good script. We got a good cast. Movie turns out and it was just a ton of fun. It was really a wonderful
and you
experience.
Definitely spent some time in Hollywood.
From using those analogies about stuff. I was there for what I liked about living in Hollywood, Nick, is that
what's that?
It was remember we were talking about the train, do, get versus create, share, receive thing. Like almost everywhere else in the world is exclusively train, do, get. Outside of like maybe a small restaurant or something. Most people aren't creating things and sharing it, receiving anything. They're creating ideas in their mind that they like to do one day that they won't actually create or share, and it'll just be there forever. And that's sad. Like, so if anybody's hearing this, I'm not a life coach. You don't need a life coach. You live in an oil matrix until we do something about that. It doesn't matter. You're always going to be frustrated. You're always going to be traumatized. But once we do something about that, this is what I like to say about solar energy is it doesn't solve any problems in the world. It just gives us the energy that we need to solve the problems, because it can sound like solar is like some utopian solution. And really, it's just a better way to access the energy that we need. It's the most boring, logical thing that you could do. I joked about people getting boring, but I'm probably the most boring person out of all of our friends because when I do something, I'm autistically focused on it. I was with Southwestern for 19 years. It's not like a few years and something that I love is really going to dissuade me from continuing down the path. We're going to find a way to create, find a way to share, find a way to receive. So we're talking about what I loved about living in Hollywood is that most places are trained to get.
Hollywood's a different story.
People, everybody has a different story, but not, yes, it's a different story, but it's not because people aren't still working. They still have their gig. They still have their hustle. They understand they live in an oil matrix. They need to do something in order to be able to drive to an audition and not be starving when they get there. But at the end of the day, you're weird if you're not working on a project. If you don't have, I'm working to create this play with this, I'm working on this new series, and you're surrounded by people that know that you can take a page full of words or a few pages of words and turn it into a multi-billion-dollar franchise, right? That there is real business in creating things that you can share with people, and then receiving either critical feedback and nobody goes, you lose money, so you make a better movie next time,
Right.
or you create a hit and then it works out great and there's abundance for everybody. And so what I liked about being in Hollywood and just allowing myself time to decompress after 19 years and after a horrible start to solar, after a sad end to a relationship with the first year that I married. And
Yeah, well, that's a loaded sentence right there.
Yeah, I mean, after all that stuff, allowing myself to do nothing and not even a tip created enough space for me to kind of see like what is going on, like what in the hell is happening here, like what are the humans doing today, why are the humans doing that today, what did all those people that I was trying to help reach their goals tell me that they really wanted to do, how's that working out, what are the frustration points, like what are, and the only thing that I could find that connected it at all was solar. Like when I got into solar, one of the reasons because I didn't want to compete with any book people, and there weren't any book people in solar at the time. And where I am now is I don't believe there is any competition in solar because
we're all on the same team.
There's 90 million people that need it, and I don't have enough time in my life to help all those people, no matter how big of an organization I build. Period. There is not enough time. There's not enough capable people, especially if you actually believe that climate change is an issue. And we need to do something about it. Like probably need to start with building a bunch of nuclear reactors to get rid of that, then put solar everywhere. So, one of the reasons I'm not too big on climate change whenever having conversations is just because it's a political wedge issue and people don't understand it. And the truth is, while solar could solve it, I don't know if we have enough time. So to me, solar is more about energy security. It's about resiliency. It's about even if the ravages of climate change do come and the grid collapses, that the sun will still be coming up and we'll still be able to make energy. If China or Russia decide to attack our utility plants and shut all the power off in the country, and they somehow can do that, it won't matter to you if you can make your own electricity at home. It's hard to make people feel a general sense of dis-ease, which is disease, to feel that worm at the core of something's wrong if it's not possible to cut them off from society, if it's not possible to cut their ability off to connect and to create and to share, because in order to create, you need to connect. In order to share, you need to connect. In order to receive, you need to connect. So what allows all connections to be possible? Energy and technology. I am not smart enough to create technology. We've got some good book people doing that stuff. I see there's some tech people out there. I'm not important enough or useful enough as a human to come up with a new form of energy. I'm never going to come up with dark matter or 0 point energy, but if that ever occurred, it'd be great. But by being a book person, there's all kinds of good stuff. And Julio, you guys ought to talk to Fred too. Fred Mamura, he was the first Estonian to hit Mort, and there's been a million now. And they've got a solar roof company that we're talking to in Estonia. It's like an Estonian, but people are always asking about solar roofs, and it's like,
what's the name of their
Solar
operation?
Stone?
What was it?
Solarstone. Check it out. Solarstone.e.
I'm gonna check that out ASAP. That's awesome.
Not ready for all climate yet, but it'd be a great solar carport option. Looks like it's going to be affordable. We're helping them come to the U.S. and so if anybody wants a solar roof, here's the thing, like what you're thinking of, I have like 3 things to say. One, it's not as efficient. Solar doesn't work well in the heat. If there's no air gap between the top of your house, you're not going to produce very much energy if it's kind of a fart. Right?
I love it.
Number 2, it's not very, you can't really customize it. And then number 3, what you're really probably saying is something like aesthetics, right? So I would challenge you to realize that what you hated about people in the summer are their stupid, stuck mindsets of this is not how we transact. If I wanted books, I would go to the store. I judge instantaneously that this interaction is not for me. And it says, not interested, not interested. Like that's what you heard for your entire life because of people who were afraid that if they gave you the time of their day, they were going to lose something money, status, whatever, that would no longer allow them to fit into this very small, contrived corner of this very big world where people would like them. So they all live in the neighborhoods, they all have the HOAs. And so what I would say is your aesthetics thing is just bullshit. It's a seventh grade trauma response to not wearing the right shoes to school or have the right shirt, or later on not having the right car or the right degree or the right promotion. And it's just a pace setter game. Like, how long do you have to play a pace setter game before you realize that the game you were playing equipped you to do something phenomenal if you choose? But if you want to keep playing pace setters, it's called dollars. Congratulations. You got $1 million, 2, 10. Woohoo! You won. Do you want something written on the cover of the pace setter about you? Or do you want to get over like ridiculous, non-logical objections like aesthetics and solar roofs? So that I just felt like saying something real Lester-ish to be like, come on, book people. We got a lot of work to do. So you can call Nick, you can call any of the guys that I mentioned that work with Sunron, you can call Julio.
Stafford Cassell.
Yeah, you can call me, you can call the Swinson brothers. Like, but for the love of God, don't be the people who grew up and got so afraid of what people would think about them that you're afraid to improve the functionality of your roof. It's just like carrying a first year with you on a follow day. Pretty worthless. At the end of the day, if you do a good job, pretty good. Right now, your roof, other than keeping the water out, it's pretty worthless. It just sits around all day, just like you did in the afternoon when you were off schedule, just like sitting there.
Yeah, so why not improve the functionality of something that doesn't really have that?
Right. Why not make it useful? Like, why not make your roof useful, like for everybody, including yourself, and save yourself some money and all that? So there's a million ways you can go solar. If you run an organization, if you run a nonprofit, if you run a school, get in touch with me, because the coolest part, I'm going to pitch what we do real quick, Nick.
Please do.
The coolest part, we're kicking this back up in Q3. So we have 3 months, and we already have some book people who are working with us on this. We have like 15 schools in Florida that we met through book people that we're working with again. But the way we reach people is we run fundraisers. We partner with an organization. They send out a link. They're like, hey, people who support us, why don't you learn about clean energy? And we'll receive a donation when you do. And you don't even have to buy anything. And so then people click and they sign up and they come to something like this, but with a bunch of people in the room. They have a good time because they get to meet me, or Holly Flitner works with us now. She's Holly Myers. She's a super badass book girl. You ought to get her on sometime. She tells.
I've heard about her.
Yeah. We've got a lot of good recommendations for book guests that would be fun. People I'd really love to listen to and see what they're up to nowadays. Then there's, I forgot what we're, oh yeah. And so then they come and they learn about clean energy, and we give a donation to the organization. And most people, after they hear an intro, want to have a demo. And so for us, our approach, we don't do. Organizations do. Churches and schools that want to raise money. Although I can't imagine many churches wouldn't work with me after the color of the conversation. But the fact that I know that shows that maybe I know how to treat your people when they come. There's just a lot of people that respond in a lot of different ways. So you need help raising funds and you want to ask people to learn about something, to hop on a computer, we can do that. And we do everything remotely. There's a lot of people that we will never reach because of how we do business, which is why we need every type of solar company doing business in every type of way. But if you're connected to a community, organization, nonprofit, let us know. We'll be happy to create a theme for you. We call it a Clean Energy for a Cause event. Give some money to you for sending people learn about solar, and then we can usually save them a bunch of money, which people care about in the oil matrix.
A dollar saved is a dollar earned, they say.
Matrix credit. You want to talk about today? You have any other questions, like who my favorite person I ever worked with? Do you guys have any rapid fire questions that you put to people?
Well, before we do that, I'm going to plug some of our last sponsors because, man, this thing has been fun, Lester. Enlight Energy is obviously the solar company that I reside with right now. And it's been a blast working with Enlight because we've really kind of put a lot of systems in place, especially more recently, where we're able to help anybody in any market. What I'm kind of doing is building, from hand from scratch, rather, just like a checklist of everything. Somebody having this conversation of, let me help you get around these misconceptions, Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner, and understand what's actually being offered. Once people know that they can finance a deal, they're way more likely to get it. So we take a very educational approach. It takes, for us, the way that our systems are set up, it's, a deal every other week equates to, a really good paycheck for 6 figures of earnings. So there's a lot of really cool potential in the fact that book people can work with us or work with Lester. There's really cool vibe of collaboration as opposed to competition in the solar industry. And I learned so much from you, Lester, and I'm bringing it to Enlight, and we're thankful for it. Yeah. So other sponsors, right? You got V-Designly. V-Design, they're based out of Estonia. So Oscar and Oliver, they are a couple awesome current book people that are, in their free time when the pandemic hit. Oscar and Oliver actually started working on web design for building out websites for businesses there in Estonia. And so Eastern Europe's like a huge tech hotbed. They got really good at it. And now they're starting to go stateside. So our website is for the podcast almost ready to be published here. And that's because they've been, getting really into the details to provide an experience for all of those listen to the podcast. You can check out all of our other sponsors on a landing page and learn about this network that we're bringing to life because of the efforts that they've been putting on behind the scenes. So if you want a new website, we'll get you in touch with them. And then, of course, Cardinal Senior Benefits. My gosh, these guys are doing so great that they are obviously promoting tons of great news.
Max is there too. Max Clark.
Yeah, Max Clark
Roberts, and Pedro.
Con Brifo. There's so many awesome people that work with Cardinal, and it makes it easy for them to actually point to a lot of success in their ranks. And so what's been really cool to see is just exactly how well they've been doing. They're growing for their 4th year in a row by doubling production for the 4th year in a row. And so one of the major appeals, right, is there's tons of other Southwestern alumni working with them. I think like 29 total book kids, where all of what they're trying to do is schedule their life around lifestyle and goals, not just, their clients' availability. So if you want actual work-life balance, if you want to impact clients in a meaningful way and have a healthy 6-figure income, Cardinal could be the right fit for you. Feel free to refer yourself or a friend or several friends. For anyone that is hired, you will earn a $500 referral bonus. So yeah, we love working with Quentin. He's been a joy to be on top of helping us build out our podcast, and we're thankful for them and everybody else. But yeah, dude, some rapid fire questions that I've got for Lester Crafton. Dude, I don't know if we actually covered your craziest story of all time. Was that the Ric Flair story, or was there like a whole other story that's like near the top of your list for the ponytail, whether it be
like the craziest story of my whole time? Like, there are a lot of things that people would find crazy. Like, I lived in New York City and Los Angeles for 5 years, right? Like,
yeah.
beach. Like, living in New York, you fly in and remember, oh my gosh, people built these giant buildings. So whenever I'm leaving campus and flying home every week, it was wild stuff. I would have been like, there are a lot of things I've done that people would consider wild, like penis puppetry. There are, what's really wild that almost nobody ever gets to hear about?
I would love to hear what's wild that nobody else gets to hear about.
And I think that unless you've experienced it, like, unless you're a sales manager, you really haven't ever had maybe a conversation like this, unless you've had a kid that has just done something horrible. It also kind of speaks to a lot of the sickness at times. Is there are people in the summer and this that actually just make up how much they're selling, right? Like, and I don't mean like you might have to win an award where you said you had a weak customer or you counted somebody solid that was weak, or like minor integrity breaches, but they're still integrity breaches, but they're minor. And, you can kind of keep going. I'm talking about people that go out for the summer and sell maybe like under 100 units for the summer, like nothing. And they would come back to checkout having not sold what they said they sold, but having gotten so used to lying about it but they just continue the act when they get
Went
to
off the
checkout.
rails.
Like, it's just like, how far does this go? And I've had conversations for 3 hours, and because it's so confusing. It's like, your numbers don't make sense. There's no way you could owe this much. Like, this just doesn't. There's something like you haven't paid for something. And you realize that. And so I've had people that came back, and so when I said speaks to the sickness, imagine how sad you must have to be as a human with whatever's going on at home, that you're willing to go out just to get away from home, and you've got some people that treat you okay, better than you were at home, and you don't want to leave to go back home, but you certainly don't want to go out and get treated like you do at home by the people, whose doors you're knocking on, which is what it feels like if you're not all the way on track. And then it gets a little bit worse, and you don't want to leave, but you don't want to go back, and you're stuck in this parallel universe. And so you figure out, I don't want to go follow every day because that's a waste of my time. So I'll just say that I sold enough to get them off my back. Kind of like what most people do in their careers with their bosses. Let me do just enough to get my boss off my back so I can keep doing what I want to do. It's not like a dysfunctional thing, but to see the levels or depths that somebody is willing to go is remarkable. Like, I think, didn't Yvette tell a story about the guy that had the books in the cornfield or wherever it was? And
my first
like,
summer,
I've
there was
had
somebody in my org did just that, and then Pat Roach shared a story of a first year that was like hitting PC in the middle of
Art Green.
was
Art Green. I think his name was Mark Green. Yeah, I remember Mark Green. He was on the cover of the Base Center, or Mark David or John David or something. I forgot what his name was.
Man.
Yeah, that guy's alive in the world today. And so, I think there's a reason that people like Yvette, Pat, and me bring it up is because it really, you have to see it to believe it. And when you see something that really challenges your basic belief and whether or not what someone is saying can be trusted, and the depths to which and the lengths to which they will go, it's like hard to keep your faith in humanity a little bit, So one of the things that is very underrated about anyone who has spent any time leading people at Southwestern is that none of it works unless you actually believe in human beings. And it's not that you're naive. That's probably the thing that I've disliked the most in the last 7 years as I've been down this crazy ass journey, starting this organization to make a giant difference in the world, is like, I hate to hear you're naive or you're Pollyanna. Like, you're just too idealistic. You're talking about this world. It sounds like some utopian bullshit. Like, don't you know about the real world? I'm like, you mean the oil matrix? Yeah, I thought this through while you were working to get oil matrix credits. I actually took some time off to think this through. And it's just, I don't have a lot of faith anymore that humans are going to do what they say they're going to do, really, at all.
Sure.
So, but I do believe that we can create a world where it matters a lot less if they do, right? Like, nobody really cares that much if a little kid does what it says it's going to do. Who cares? You didn't really impact much anyway.
Yeah.
And if you'll recall, there was never a time where you had a class that said, welcome, you're now an adult. You're still a kid. You just slowly changed into this person you are today, but that doesn't mean that who you actually are and who you were born to be doesn't still reside within you. And it seems to me that part gets cut off when we start trying to figure out how we have to be something to fit somebody else's idea of what it is to be good or right or whatever. And so I think there's a lot of people in the world who are doing just enough to barely get by. And as long as they can hide, they're willing to hide. But this is a time in history where it's just not okay for people to hide who have the potential that book people do.
Make a difference. Absolutely.
Nick, you can afford it. You're good at playing the oil matrix games. I know you have money. I'm grateful that you have money. None of this has been intended as any type of knock at all. Like, you're the reason that I had faith that I could go 7 years to the bottom of the depths of human existence and come out great, because I'm like, well, if they can do it, I can do it. So I'm not worried about, can I go play this game? Can I go be a VP of sales somewhere? Well, if I don't talk about uncolorful stuff, and I'm a little bit PC, maybe can I go be a trainer or something? Probably, but why? And so why matters to me. And I guess if there's one thing that I would say, it's that nobody ever asked me this question until I was in Los Angeles. I already finished with Southwestern. I never ask anybody this question. I ask them a watered down version of it every day, but never ask them this. And the question would be, like, what would you love to do? Like, and you don't have to answer that today. It's not really for you. It's a thought question. It's for anybody. It's like, what would you love to do? Not what would you like to do? Not what do you think you could succeed doing? What could you do that would eventually allow you to do what you love to do? But like, what would you love to do? And if you figure that out, then all the things that are supposed to make things hard just make it a better story along the way. Like, if you know in the end, if you really believe, do you believe good wins in the end? Then be good. Like, if you don't believe that, then don't even waste any time thinking about it. Be a sociopath and go get as much as you can, like the guy in the story that takes everything from everybody. Maybe one day you'll win that game and you'll finally have enough to realize it doesn't matter. You know, I think one thing that John Carey, my co-founder partner, have in common. Also, shout out to Channing Porter, who's another book girl that went out into the city with me and beta tested the very first earliest version of what we're doing.
Shout out to both of them.
Yeah, so Channing's a beautiful human, and I couldn't. And Chris Oberle's a book guy that is a computer programmer, like a Fortune 5 company that did a lot of our software at the beginning. But John's the partner that's with me, and I think the one thing that we're very fortunate, and I know a lot of book people could probably relate to this, is that we had, because I grew up on a farm, you know, poor farmer, manual labor, secretary mom, manual labor dad. John grew up with a mom, single mom, trailer, popping around all over the place, raised by the community. Is it because of where we came from, we didn't really have to have a lot to realize that there is no additional happiness that can come from piling up more. And so once we had enough to realize, okay, we can be great in that world, then we got to ask, well, what do we really want to do? What would we love to do? And like you were saying earlier, what really feels good to me is adding as much value as possible, as many lives as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes me feel good every day to see all the kids I worked with. And I didn't get, like, the thing that makes me sad about this, I didn't get to talk about all of them. Like, I'd love to go through and just talk about the people I've had a chance to reconnect with in just the last year, like this kid, Houston from West Virginia, you know, and Jason Rose and Benji Graybill and all the Washington guys. And then Kleifkin's killing it with everything he does. And then there's Sika and who's become this weird. Chris Sika is the best connector of people I ever met in my Southwestern career. Like, just really good at connecting, heartfelt, like, is real, like, so real, really cares. But he's somehow become like this financial guru now. And then Dan Cumming, who's always been brilliant and poetic and artistic, is doing something with like augmented reality. And Luke works for PayPal, I think now. I think about them as my Richmond group. And then I think about, you know, the Maryland kids. I've already mentioned Adam and Tina, but there's a bazillion other ones up there too, like Jason and Lauren Kensky, who are the whole Kreza family. I mean, heck, Kayla Kreza was sold more books than any first year in history, except for like one or two, you know. And now she owns her own jewelry company. And her big sister Katie, who's raising a great mom, or was a great mom. With, like, there's just Billy Hesh and like Matt Baumgartner runs like the biggest boat dealership and on the East Coast. There's people I've lost touch with who don't want to talk to me at all, like Daniel Weiner. There's people like Jen Payne down in Charlotte who are doing all kinds of amazing things. K2 and Joe Ladman, who run their own like child development, like brain stuff to work to. They make playgrounds for people to keep kids healthy. And they own a brewery and they're involved in leadership stuff. Cunningham, keeping people fit. That's the Charlotte. You know, Jen owns a couple of businesses. If I just went by state and thought about, you know, all the people. And then, I mean, we spent like 2 minutes talking about Brandon today. And Brandon is such a key, important central figure in my Southwestern would have done all of these, like, and that's just a small piece. Like, we worked together building a business. He was really good at the stuff that I was bad at, and he was willing to do the stuff that I was bad at. And it created really a really workable, fun thing to the point where we bought a condo together, like at the end of the career. And probably the real reason I ended up leaving is because all my friends left. We could get up in arms about philosophy and what I liked and didn't like, but and Tina, and there's Mike Davis on the insurance company, and I've already talked about Peter, and who else do I have? I mean, the UT groups, show forwards, there's just that's bunging. I could go forever. So what I really regret, you mentioned Andy Laws and Brooke worked, and they're doing great stuff early, and then there's just so many people that I am so grateful for that have impacted me in some way, either through some triumph or some reaction to adversity that I knew wasn't the reaction that I would choose to have when faced with that they gave me information for how to respond differently. And then being willing to allow me to be so fucked up as a person. Like, who the hell uses an anal sex analogy to make a very simple point about, hey, I'm talking to you about doing something different, but that's from an era before I dealt with my sexual abuse stuff as a kid, right? So I was a little bit more stuff there. It's just now I don't care, so I'll say anything. But I'm fortunate that so many humans for so long had enough faith, old guys, Chris and Alex and Paul and Dave and Lee and Dave Stroud and just Wills Allen and, Bunny Stream and April McCullum, who's Bain now. She's got her solar job finished yesterday, Nice. So one of the things I like best about solar job, I had a reason to get back in touch with all these people, but I could keep we could have an entire episode where all I do is go through and talk about how awesome I think it is that all these people that I worked with are doing all this really rad stuff now. Yeah. And I didn't have anything to do with it. I am just along for the ride. And if my part was just conveying some messages that they applied to allow them to do the things that they're doing. So, I appreciate you having me on. It's always fun to talk about Southwestern stuff. I would say I apologize to book people if you've been offended by anything I've said, but I'm not going to. There are old things that I'd
apologize, but I won't.
Yeah, you're a book person. Get over it. If you have a problem with me, then tell me about it. Because I remember, and I'll listen to you. And I do apologize if I've done anything or say anything to hurt you or harm you. If I would like to know about that, so I could apologize if that is the case. But it's just kind of like I have that guilt that a parent might have that raised 50 kids. Like,
there's a lot of chances to mess up.
If I hadn't done that, would that have worked out? A lot of chances to mess up. But what a crazy experience to get to hear all of those stories. So no, I'm sorry, I don't have any funny. No, I've got Brandon's first summer. He saw this dude that had an alligator, and the alligator was crawling out, and he's like, "Get back in your hole, Al." And Brandon told me about it and said, "You can't say anything to anybody about this because this guy will come and kill me." He told me not to tell people there was an alligator. So I was telling him the story back. I'm at breakfast the next morning. I said, "You really saw an alligator yesterday?" And then the dude walks in and looks at us and was like, "Oh my God." He thought he was going to die. I mean, there's those colorful things, I saw it. Yeah. But I remember when I first started selling books, I had a goat on top of a car, and I took a picture of it because I was like, wow, that's really weird. I was selling deep in the country.
Yeah, right.
But no, I mean, would that even wiggle the radar on most book people?
No, that's like selling in the country expectation right there.
Right. It's just sort of these are the things that happen. And I have such a wide swath of experiences because I didn't just live my experience. Every night when I would see the stats from my organization, I had to imagine what was that day like for that person. I know what a 3 sit-down day feels like. I 10 customer day feels like. They were interpretive human experiences in an attempt to understand, to add value. So I've just lived. I feel like I'll be 45 this year, and I feel like I'm 45 going on 250 just because of the overwhelming number of experiences that I've had because of the people that I was fortunate enough to meet who were willing to give a day or a week or a summer or 10 of their lives to go on this shared journey and this shared adventure with me.
Yeah.
So, how small would it be of me to whine about an organization that gave me that opportunity? Were there problems at the end? Yeah. But who the hell has a 20-year relationship that doesn't have some kind of problems, right?
Mhm.
And so, but the day, Nick, what do you want to talk about? That's a rapid fire question that led to a long fire answer. I'm picking up my computer cord, so it'll run out of juice soon and make it skip.
Oh, you're fine. You're
I'm not in a
fine.
hurry.
Well,
Thanks for
let me
listening
ask
so
you.
well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, let me ask you this: if we were to have you on again with someone like a KJ or Matt Ross is still with the company, but we should definitely have like a panel episode where you and some of these other people that you worked with, like Brandon, like KJ, like anybody else. I'd love to hear those stories.
Oh
Man.
my God. Yeah. Like if you want to, like, it's not that we don't have stories that are pretty remarkable, like of wild things that just I don't even remember anymore. Like,
Right.
but as soon as it's said, like I
Gotta
have
get
this
that.
theory that
Yeah.
my entire younger life was lived to create, like my youth was used to create comedic content for my middle-aged life.
And
Like
here we are.
I remember to look back. I'm like, I did that. I said that. Like, holy cow! What kind of twisted individual with, like, because most of the stuff about book stories aren't really like from the book field. Like, I remember I was a young sales manager. I rented some car. I don't know why I didn't have a car at the time. It was like this tiny car. It had a paper license plate. The paper license plate blows off.
Oh, no.
I'd been recruiting for like 3 weeks. I get arrested for driving without a paper license plate. My license was probably suspended at the time too. I don't remember why they arrested me.
Oh
But
my.
I was trying to drive to Chapel Hill to go see a football game. Matt was driving from Arizona, and I called him from jail. And so he drove an extra like 3 hours to pick me up, and then 3 hours back the other way. And then we went to the game. I've got stories like deciding to go to Atlantic City at 4 o'clock in the morning and then driving. I've got stories
Wow.
from, like, the crazy part is how I live my life. At the end of my career, I was taking so much Adderall, I would like stay up for 3 nights out of 7 in the week. That's one of the reasons I was glad to have my break, because I'm completely unmedicated now, other than natural sources, which are preferable.
Right.
So, but at this moment, that feels really good. I had a chance to get some of my health back, which I lost during COVID, but not flying everywhere, like extreme stuff. Like most of that just came from, I mean, opportunity. There's just so many things. Like, that's just one example of like a really good friend. So most of my good book stories are like,
Very
I
fun.
went to Bonnaroo with Kevin for his bachelor party, and I was the best man at his wedding. He was a preacher at mine. And when we were at Bonnaroo, Henry went with us, and he literally, I learned what the word overlooked meant, because if there were anything that could have been questionable that we may or may not have been doing, Henry always made sure to look up, to overlook it, because he had to maintain his thing. So a lot of, like, we'll put that rumor to rest for all you old guys. A lot of people thought, did Henry go do drugs with Lester and Kevin at Bonnaroo and Brandon? The answer is no. Unfortunately, he did not.
Unfortunate.
But but Henry was and still is super cool. Like, if Henry Bedford hadn't come into Southwestern, my whole life is different. He's the one that told me it was possible to ask questions, shake things up, listen to people, take things in a whole new direction. Like, and I've been blessed with an overwhelming number of mentors and relationships throughout my life. Exactly the right time. So, so a panel would be really fun. Even if you left me off, if you brought Matt, KJ on, you could, if you want to, like, Brandon, here's this, like, it's just ridiculous stuff. So you're thinking about stories. Most of our stories are like this. So Brandon and I, when we're living in Nashville, park my car in a parking lot, and it closed at midnight. And so we were still out. We came back and they'd stolen our car, right? The lot was closed. You have to come back in the morning. And this is before Uber and there were no taxis, credit cards. We were basically stranded. And so then we just decided, well, we're just going to go in. And so, like, got on the handle, pulled the handle down, walked in, raised the gate, took the car out with a lot of interesting stuff in between. I could tell you stories about playing 5-10, high limit, high low, Omaha, pot limit, crazy game, $6,000 pots with the guy that fought chickens and painted houses north of town. That I've got a lot of crazy stories. It doesn't even include, the wildness that was my marriage, but there's a lot of things. And that's a very long way of saying if you want to have a panel of people on to tell those kind of stories or stuff we don't even remember from the book field.
It's on. It's happening.
It has a lot of really funny stories. Yeah, it'll be good, man. I'm welcome. I won't run out of things to talk about. Like I could have a 3-hour podcast about John Kerry, or Adam Allen or Tim Edmonds or any of those humans, Talby, like Peter and Davis Miller and Jane, who are still good friends of mine. I didn't even talk about them because I wasn't thinking about Clemson, but then you got Jill Poston and I'll just keep going. Like my life has just been blessed by so many, like Dave Davidson. Like it just doesn't end. When I start thinking of one person, I think, oh, that person and that person and that person and that person and that person.
That's a pretty, blessed, lucky, well-connected life to live, man. And I love that. I can count myself as one of those connections because, dude, I tell you what, I've thought, oftentimes about the role that you played in my own life and, cerebral development, sleeping on your couch while I was doing my TT back in the day and all these other run-ins that we've had throughout the years. I'm grateful for you, Lester. Yeah. I've looked up to you and I've learned a lot from you. And I wish nothing but the best. It's exciting to hear that Ovanova is really picking up more than they ever have. And, by all means, keep it up. Let's see how we can help each other make those wins, those omni wins of helping that transition to a cleaner, brighter, sustainable future. So, gosh,
I'm thank you, Nick, for your kind words, and you do the same. There's one thing you can count me for is I'm not very good at quitting.
Yeah, right.
I'm pretty good at finding a way, and so I don't think that I'm the hero. I think the homeowners and the organizations and people like you are the heroes of this story. But humans collectively, we have a story to write about our future. Is it going to be we laid down and let the king keep torturing us while we complained and blamed other people for not doing it as well as we do and their mistakes? We're going to build a world that works because the sun comes up in the morning. Like that's our choice. We can do it the next 2 decades. Is it going to take a lot of work? Yes. You got to do some stuff? Yes. But is it possible? Hell yeah, it's possible. And if we have enough book people involved, I bet we could get a lot more done a lot faster than most people think it can happen. And we won't need governments and complaint. We'll just get it done. So we won't need governments to do that job. I don't want to throw off what tiny shredded credibility I had with anybody was saying we won't need governments. And it sounds like I'm talking about some anarchic utopia. See, utopia. I can't even say my words right. That means it's time to go. Anything else you want to talk about today, Nick?
No, let's definitely get you on so we can talk more in the future. It's always a pleasure, Lester. In the not too distant future, it'd be cool to see in person, whether in Mexico, BIZZLER, right?
BIZZLER! Well, I'm single, so I was like,
don't have as many responsibilities tying you down for that August 15th through the 19th. $1,500 to get your flight included and everything. So get your passports now if you need them updated. And but yeah, dude.
Remember, you used to have to work 80 hours a week and then really hard and do really well to get a trip to Mexico. That took how much is 3 months of your time worth now? Well, now it's only $1,500. You can go to business. Yeah, you just need
right. Act now because prices are going up.
$1,100 if you just go and buy the flight. Where's it going to be? Do you know the resort?
Yeah, Playa del Carmen. It's going to be the Valentin Imperial Resort over there. So it's kind of more of a GRG feel versus a BIZZLER. So anyway, not only had the BIZZLER with us, be a monthly supporter, be part of our stable. There's plenty of other ways that you can stay involved in the Ponytails Podcast Network and everything that we're building out here. If you want to be a sponsor, not only can you get your words on the air like we've been doing with everybody today, but you can also join us on bi-weekly derby meetings where you're able to share business tips and tricks with the likes of Pat Roach, Will Metcher, and everyone else we mentioned on this podcast. So
that sounds fun. Will's
yeah.
good to do. There's what was I going to tell you? That all sounds good. I'm open to any of those things. What was I going to tell you at the end about all that? I don't remember. It doesn't matter. None of it does. Like on a long enough timeline, we're looking at the heat death of the universe unless we figure out what to do about it or how to take on some other form entirely. So I would say the most important thing to remember is even after 20 years of having to pretend like it was the most important thing that ever happened in order just to keep it going, it's really it's not true. It's not important. Nothing's important. You're going to die. And so maybe realize you only have one life instead of acting like you're going to keep living forever. And maybe we'll actually be able to live forever if we are productive enough to figure out how we can be useful in this one life. And thanks for having me on. And none of it matters. And let me know if I can be useful to you in any way.
None of it matters, but will matter to you.
It will matter to you.
Love it, Lester. Thanks for everyone for tuning in to episode number 113 of the Ponytails Podcast. We got some pretty cool people here in the near future. You can check those out on
I know. You need to talk to Fred. Fred's one of the more interesting people I've met in a while.
Okay.
Fred Mamura. Well, I mean, Fred's like, he's over there right now. His job is to harass convoys. He's like Estonian military.
Oh, you're talking in Eastern Europe right now.
Yeah, he's in Eastern Europe, and he's trying to keep a war from coming to Estonia because should it come there, then he'll be there harassing convoys. He's like a lone agent that goes out to the back of some person. He's also involved in solar with Solar Stone, so he can magnify those stories. But he's hilarious and very, very intelligent human. I've enjoyed meeting. So I didn't know him at all 3 months ago, but in the last 3 months, I've really enjoyed getting to know him, and somebody I'd recommend having on.
Man, we really could go on for a while, but everybody else, that would be a great fit. But again, thank you for tuning in, everybody. Check us out on all these platforms. Stay, up to date on what we've got in the future, because we'll get Lester on again, and everyone else to tell their awesome stories. So, signing out with Lester Crafton. This was Nick Taverdi, co-host of the Ponytails Podcast. Check us out next time, and we'll see you there. Bye.
Bye, Nick.